make sure that I come up on the other window because, we had that one week where OBS just decided not to send shit out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
Very
it shows
impressive
us.
library you have behind you.
Thank you. And this is about half of my books because the other ones are in my campus office because I actually have an office now that I can store books in. It's great.
Oh, didn't realize you were a professor.
Yeah, as of this fall.
Yes,
which
this is
wild.
technically Dr. Eucharist now.
Yeah.
Is it an actual office or is it like a TA's office?
No, it's a real office. I have a window and everything. They gave me 6 bookshelves. Like it feels excessive. Like
I mean, yeah, it's not a monk cell. It's usually what they give fucking professors when they first show up. I remember when my buddy, he does music. He when he first started teaching at universities, when he first got an office, he's like, I got a closet.
Yep.
I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I literally have a mop closet that has been converted into an office.
Office space is at a premium, okay? When I was in grad school, they had a graduate student assistant office that we weren't actually allowed to use. It was the 3rd floor of a building, and the 3rd floor specifically was condemned because there was no sprinkler system. And so we weren't supposed to be up there, but we were always up there. But we installed a doorbell so that the lady at the front of the house, if the fire marshal came by, could ring the doorbell and we could evacuate to the 2nd floor because we weren't supposed to be on the 3rd floor. And they're like, bring your computers and stuff with you. There can't be any evidence.
Okay, I'm sorry. You just gave me a White Joe Clark vibes, like very lean on me. Get those chains off the doors. Get those chains off the door.
Exactly. That's almost exactly it.
What is your doctorate in?
Political science, unfortunately.
I mean, that's not unfortunate, my friend.
Longer, you are now officially finished?
Sorry?
I thought I heard someone say you're a doctor now, so you're no longer a candidate, PhD candidate.
Yeah, I mean, I defended last January, and I think my degree award was last May. So this past year I've had it, but now I'm just actually starting as an actual professor of something.
Yeah, and I always joked with him I'd wait to call. Yeah, I always joked with him I'd wait till he got to the new job before I said doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. Now they're keeping me around for at least a little while.
It's like I told my buddy.
For the future, if I don't screw it up, that's the plan.
Yeah, it's like I told my buddy. I've known him since we were 11 years old. I told him I will call you doctor exactly one time. After that, it's back to just your name.
When
I will do it incessantly until you're annoyed by it.
When I submitted my change of address for him to move, there was a place with a drop down menu for suffix, and I was like, oh, you bet I'm putting PhD as my suffix on my post office change of address form. Like, it feels so pretentious normally, but if you give me a drop down menu and there's no consequences, I'm doing it. Like,
well, here's the thing: in a address situation like that, to me, that's not pretentious. If you put that on your mailbox in your apartment building, maybe. But like on the
Dr. Professor Eucharist to you,
yeah,
neighbor. Like,
yeah. For me, it's like, but with the post office, shit, dude. Like, I've seen stuff addressed to my buddy where it literally doesn't have anything but doctor and his last name on it. So, like,
I think one of my favorite Reddit posts I've ever seen was the person who was like, when you book a plane ticket, they give you a prefix drop-down menu, and nobody can stop you from putting Lord before your name. And you would not believe the treatment you get when you're Lord so-and-so on Delta.
Oh God, like, the scam started before fucking sales credit the title sale thing. No, yeah. Delta started it. No.
Oh yeah, we definitely bought my friend a lordship in Sealand. Yeah, we did that. That was fun.
But on this week we get to Canto 11, and since we're catching Eucharist back up, we have missed 2 weeks, but it's fine because, like, this is the fun one. We're kind of glad to have you here. It'd be even better if Beckett shows up because we're getting to the popes in hell. We've just passed the city of Dis. We're getting to the unholy stench and slowing down a bit. So this one's going to be a lot of fun. Last week, as we went through, there was far less to recap, or 2 weeks ago now, far less to recap because pretty much everything in that canto was self-explanatory. We had less commentary on that canto than any canto previously because it actually drew parallels to things that are mirrored today very easily, so on and so forth. Yeah, like as we get through this, like Virgil, in my opinion, this is when Virgil's like attitude shifts a little bit. He goes from being the paragon of like the worldly virtues, and occasionally you see a little bit slip where Dante tries to show him as more human than he has previously. Show his failings without glossing as much as he has previously, I should say. Also, one of the ones where Longfellow didn't make us want to like jump off of a building for trying to read his version. So, this week's readings will actually break pretty quickly. It will probably be 3 or 4 tercets a piece based on natural flow. I have not been breaking them out like I did the first week because, like, honestly, this looks better, and like doing those other ones where I have to sit there and color code everything is honestly time consuming and annoying. So, oh god. When we left off at the end of the last episode, we were dealing with a conversation between Virgil and Dante about the events that had just transpired, trying to get through the gates around Dis, and like the vision of the valley below as they're seeing. And this is the continuation of that conversation and expansion of introduction of the characters in question. So, if you would like to start, Despy, let me move the thing up now.
Where do you want me to go until?
Honestly, based on this, it looks like we will go until 12.
Until 12? Okay, no problem. Upon the margin of the lofty bank, which great rocks broken in a circle made, we came upon a still more cruel throng, and there, by reason of the horrible excess of stench the deep abyss throws out, we drew ourselves aside behind the cover of a great tomb, whereon I saw a writing which said, Pope Anastasius,
Close enough.
yeah,
Anastasius.
I hold Anastasius. I hold, whom out of the right way Photinus drew. Slow it behoved our descent to be, so that the sense be first a little used. To the sad blast, and then we shall not heed it.
Okay, so at this point in the 14th century, anybody reading this just dropped their goddamn book and their sherry. Because Dante just put a pope in hell. And it wasn't Alexander Sextus. Like, this is a insane thing to do in the 14th century. There have been multiple executions for heresy for saying things about previous popes like this, and this is a man of an aristocracy doing it in book form. This is huge, and this is why, like, to me, there had to be a certain level that of sociological power that Dante had within his cities to get away with this. And it wasn't just being a hero of the wars, it wasn't just being, confidants to certain, city leaders and things like that. This is taking on Rome itself with some of the things that he's saying. Even though he is very reverent while saying it, he doesn't, what was the words for it? Yes, pull the smelling fleece over it to hide the flaws. He's accentuating the flaws in a way that before this, pretty much everybody who did it, even if we have their books today, got killed for doing it. Uh-oh. Eucharist? I saw your eyes flipping side to side.
Oh, no.
I was like, he's reading something. We're in trouble.
No.
Isn't Dante pretty much towards the end of his life by the time this thing gets published anyway? That might be part of it too. Like, what are you gonna do to me now? Already dead.
That is what most people think when it comes to this, but you got to remember he published this as a single work, much like any author of his day. Sections of this would have been published as like pamphlets, and this one was probably one of the ones that would have been out earlier, since we're early in the cantos as opposed to, you know, getting towards Paradiso. This one was likely had been already made into a pamphlet and had been spread wider than when the final publication date happened. Like, remember, Dickens used to do that too, later on. He readopted the practice of publishing, like, chapters at a time.
I guess that's cheaper than the whole book.
I don't know the reason. Like, I'd actually have to dig further into that. At least the way it was always portrayed to me by, like, teachers. This was a way to, like, keep the audience engaged, because 5 years writing a book and then publishing it could be 10 years before it circulates wider, and by then, like, your audience is gone. It is the fear that they had back then. So they would actually publish in multiple newspapers in, like, the 1800s and 1700s, that would spread out with the mail packets to prevent that kind of disassociation. Again, at least according to what my teacher told me. I don't know how accurate that is, because it just sounded good enough and I didn't look further. Just to be honest. That being said, Eucharist, anything to bring up about Mr. Anastasius here, who loves to, let's just put it this way, even the Catholic Church doesn't like bringing this asshole up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the first trivia you find about him is he's one of there are only 2 of the first 50 popes who weren't canonized as saints, and he's one of them. But I was, last night and this morning, as I was just looking for other resources, apparently there is some hefty debate now in Dante scholarship about whether or not Dante made a historical mistake here. Because he's dealing with somebody who was almost 1,000 years removed from him at this point. So that's a pretty freaking long time. I don't know a lot about people from, you know, the early 1000s, for example, or 1200s even. Even my history books about them might not be terribly reliable. And so there's some people who think that he's confusing Anastasius II, the Pope, with Anastasius II, the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire, at the same time roughly as Anastasius II was Pope. So there's 2 different historical figures that are the second of their name, Anastasius. Both of them are heretics. One of them is a pope, one of them is an emperor. And so some people think he made a mistake, and the emperor was undoubtedly a heretic. He was a Miaphysite. And so, but the Pope Anastasius II was condemned or looked badly on for basically attempting badly to mend the schism between East and West, and providing communion to someone who was in schism with the Catholic Church. And so,
well, he did some more than just that, but yeah.
Well, yes. So I found an interesting essay. I can link it in the side chat. I have not dug into it. I don't know how persuasive it is. But the author, who I also don't know who it is making the case. So he says, some people think this is Anastasius II, the Pope. Some people think he made a historical mistake, and he actually meant Anastasius II, the Byzantine Emperor. This guy says, I think, like Dante does in a couple other places in the poem, actually, he thinks he's intentionally melding these 2 historical characters into one for the purpose of some sort of, like, grander political theological commentary. I mean, so there are places where Dante does this. So.
Yeah, I was about to say Dante does that in when we get into Purgatorio a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't be outside the scope. But my issue is this: he puts two other popes here.
Mm-hmm.
That it seems like a harmonization to say he did not intend to the first version of the Pope, or that he was confused. He is living in one of the bastions of knowledge in Italy at this time. Like, he has the access to some of the best tutors, the best libraries available in his entire country. And he was extremely, extremely well read. Conflating the two to make a point, that I could believe. Fully making a mistake, that seems like a harmonization.
Yeah, I don't have my copy of it with me. If any of you have the PDF of it, apparently this is the scholarly line that Mark Musa takes in his commentary on the.
It's in my spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, send him the spreadsheet, because we got that started after he was here the last time.
Oh yeah.
Because he's doing a spreadsheet with all the different translations with like links and
beautiful.
stuff. Right now, because it has all our real names, we're not publishing that to the videos.
Okay.
Once we get it completed and all that, we will. That's why I'm keeping the actual like screenshots of the pages up to read, so that they can see this is exactly what's on the page. Here's where they mark what commentary indice it is, etc.
It's in the side chat. You can go in as anonymous now. So
Beautiful.
But he's got links to some of the art. When we finally start putting that thing up, it's going to be great. So like, it just seems like, going back to what we were saying, it just seems like it ahistorical to say that this is an outright mistake. Could he be mistaken on some details about that Pope? Yes. Could we still to this day be mistaken about details of this Pope? Absolutely, because it's part of history. A lot of it is best guess to best evidence. That being said, this isn't some nobody living in Germany, several thousand miles away, writing in a place where like he doesn't have direct access to quite literally the people who are tutors to kings and emperors. Like this just seems, it does not make logical sense to me. That's like saying I dropped somebody in DC and they couldn't hit a politician while throwing a dead cat. Like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to hunt down any more recent kind of scholarship on this, but I'm always on this. Generally when critical scholars are like, this very, very smart person made a really dumb mistake, I'm distrustful of the critical scholars. So I'm probably on your side on this. I just thought it was an interesting.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: there are going to be a lot of things that Dante is going to make a dumb mistake on. Because, like, for example, he's dealing with a lot of the Greek legends where he has a very finited amount of the information, because we have not had the expansion from the Eastern Empire back in with that information. We have not had the expansion from Egypt of this information. We have had multiple reconglomerations of collected knowledge, after Dante. So there are things that he does make glaring errors on. But that is because everybody in Italy at that time would have made that glaring error. Like, even the best scholar.
Geocentrism, right? Okay. Definitely not a mistake.
Rich is trying to trigger me this morning, I can see. Now, that being said, like, there are going to be things that he makes mistakes on, and we should not put him too high on a pedestal. But the other thing we do need to take into account is historical framework and context. And, like, again, I cannot imagine dropping somebody into the greatest repository of knowledge outside of Rome itself at this time, and him having the wrong information about the Pope. The other thing is, he wasn't in one of the cities that were rather anti-Vatican at the time, in the same way that, say, Tuscany was in the early 1200s, and so on and so forth. Like, where like this stuff would have been almost like Mad Magazine kind of like taboo art, where this stuff kind of circulated the dark corners and sock drawers. Well, nobody wore socks in the 1200s, but you get my point.
I do. Yes, I'm.
And Com, you've been exceedingly quiet this morning, my friend. Feeling okay?
Yeah, mainly because I've been reading up on all of this history because I have almost no background on this. It seemed clear at first what Dante was intending, but now there's a lot of question about whether or not he was mistaken about the which Anastasius
Yeah,
was.
like I said, I just don't buy
Record
that one.
that I can find seems to imply that both may have been at least in the sense that Dante is meaning it led away from the straight path, as both are considered to have accepted the heresy of Photinus and the Acacians, which
I'm so sorry.
in the first place.
I'm sorry.
He names himself after Anastasius, right?
I have found clarity. Okay, Wikipedia phrased this badly. This is actually what Mark Musa says specifically, and this is far more plausible, I think, for all of us. Mark Musa says Anastasius II, Pope from 496 to 498, was popularly believed for many centuries to be a heretic because supposedly he allowed Photinus, a deacon of Thessalonica who followed the heresy of Acacius, to take communion. This heresy denied Christ's divine birth, asserting that he was begotten by a mortal man. Thus, Anastasius II supposedly revealed his belief in a heretical doctrine. This is Musa's scholarly argument. He says, it has been proved, however, that this pope was confused with the Byzantine emperor Anastasius I by Dante's probable sources. So he's not saying that Dante made a mistake. He's saying Dante's using a history book by people who had made this historical mistake. Similar names, similar heresies, and he conflates them because that's the source he's using. He's using, Sayers mentions this. He's using one of the editions of the Liber Pontificalis, which is a series of biographies of popes that was published from the 800s on. And apparently some of them had some glaring errors. So.
Well, that we know are glaring errors now, but were harmonizations of history, much like people still do harmonizations to this day, like on these figures, because oh no, the popes couldn't be horrible people. The blah blah blah. Come on, man. Like that's my problem with this. Like I will dig into this further after this episode because I will take hours doing that and we don't have the time for it. Because like I immediately, and you can call me too strict on this, I immediately discount all scholarship if you have signed a doctrine of faith saying you will not admit anything that contradicts the Bible or the church. And unfortunately, we have way too many scholars that sign shit like that. So I have to dig to see if some of these people are saying shit like that. If not, then this might have some validity, because that just seems like that makes more logical sense, yes, but it also seems like we have done harmonizations on the popes so often that sometimes it takes archaeological evidence to tell the Vatican to shut the fuck up and stop telling us a myth. Like, we're gonna have to dig further into that one before I trust any of it, because like that's one of those things where it's like,
well, and to me, it doesn't affect materially how we're interpreting this, because even if Dante is relying on, let's assume the history book he used is inaccurate, the point he's making is the same, right? That even,
everybody would have been
Pope
using
can end
that
up in
history
hell
book
with schismatic things. Yes, exactly. So this is not, it's not a fault of Dante. It's not even necessarily a fault of the history book. And within the context of the literature, what is this? What does it mean that he's putting this pope, who everybody believed at this point was a heretic, in hell? That's, I think, the important thing. So I didn't mean to send us down this like ridiculous.
No. We do this all the time. It is not just you, by the way, my friend. We are all nerds and like to dig. That being said, conflating the two to make a wider point would also make sense, because we do know that he has a tendency to do that with at least 5 people during Purgatorio and 3 during the Inferno. The Carmel isn't as good as the last one, but the little white section in the middle is perfect.
Whoa.
That looks great.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah,
Pretty.
Yeah, the video he sent yesterday or the day before, the caramel colored section was like much better looking than the white section that is on this one. But yeah, that one, like that's pretty damn good. back to what I was saying, conflating the two, he does it at least 8 times before we even get to Paradiso. So this could be a 9th time. It would not shock me. He does this often because of the fact that he is writing to an aristocracy where some of these are tongue-in-cheek jokes, as was with the Feltro x Feltro guy. Upon digging further into that, that was a tongue-in-cheek joke. He was trying to imply multiple people and multiple places, and the actual felt to felt meaning cheap clothing. So it was all kinds of shit. Like he does this often. It would not surprise me if that is what this is. It would shock me if the other 2 popes are, though.
Oh, I don't. No, those are unambiguous. Those, like, at least one of them is the one that Dante lived through. So that's undoubtedly. That would be like me putting, Obama in hell, right? It's unambiguous who I mean when I say Obama. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, honestly, funny joke, but I've known you for long enough. I could see it. No, no. It just seems, it seems. Unless this is a mistake that every scholar would have made within his area, it does not seem like it would be a general mistake for this person. It just doesn't seem like he makes many of those, especially not during the Inferno. Towards the end of Paradiso, there's some... Let's just say he was getting old. and put it as kindly as we can, because it definitely drops in quality once we get there. That being said, I will pick up from there. The master thus, and unto him I said, some compensation find, that the time pass not idly. And he, thou seest I think of that, my son, upon the inside of these rocks, began he then to say, are 3 small circles from grade to grade, like those which thou art leaving. They are my fucking tongue today. They all are full of spirits maledict, but hereafter sight alone suffice thee. Hear how and wherefore they are in constraint. Of every malice that wins hate in heaven, injury is the end, and all such end, either by force or fraud, afflicteth others. But because fraud is man's peculiar voice, more it displeases God, and so stand lowest the fraudulent, the greater the dole assails them. I am going to stop there because, this is one of the points that, this is a shift in theology at this time period. Prior to the 14th century, this would have been viewed as a rather peculiar ideology to attribute to the church and to God. That violence somehow was contrary to God's intent. Actually, we can find direct Vatican scholarship of popes and cardinals actually being at the front lines of battles prior to this point in time period. I forget the pope's name now, but there was a pope in the 600s who was literally standing next to the king in the middle of the frickin' battle. So, this was a shift, and this shifted during the 13th century because at that time period the church actually stepped back to its military efforts because it had felt that it had the political might to not need the armies, that its political will would bring the armies of its neighbors to its defense if necessary, and it highly minimized the Roma Guard compared to what they were in previous centuries to this. So he is talking about a shift that Virgil never would have known. So this is Virgil talking about a shift that Virgil could only know because he is dead and sees all as a dead person, basically acting as a shuttle guide through hell for people. Because, as pointed out in previous cantos, this isn't the first time he's done this. This shift in theology would have been something that Dante would have found rather enduring, because he technically, it comes from that transitory period between the two shifts in the church's modality. In fact, even certain cardinals' forces fought with them during the Battle of Campaldino. So again, church was not always opposed to violence even in his lifetime, or even to advocate against violence in his lifetime. So like, to me, this is he's doing this intentionally, before he gets into like any of the others that he's going to name, because of the fact that like he is trying to show the delineation that we will, even popes can be heretics, anybody can be, evil, anybody can be good. We can literally see the shifts in history, and I think this is what he's pointing to here, because he's trying to point to not only the circles of hell, but at least in my opinion and Charity's opinion, make a juxtaposition between the circles before and the circles to come, to parallels of the afterlife to come to the life we live today. And there's several other scholars who do, but Chiardi was the one I used to initially form this conclusion. And it just seems to track with the wording, regardless of which translation I use.
I don't know if this is just like religions in general, but like, and I'm not making fun of religions whatsoever, but usually if there's a culture of usually if there's a culture of like war, death, destruction, and whatnot, a lot of times, even if a religion like advocates like peacefulness, they tend to go along with it and find a way to justify it in some way, shape, or form. I mean, even in Japan, they did that with Buddhism. Basically, like Buddhism's all about like the reduction of harm, and their entire thought process was the way to reduce harm is to kill the people that harm the most people.
Yeah, I mean, look, any ideology can be manipulated to fit a particular set of actions, unless that ideology is pretty fucking strict in its rules. That being said, yeah, I think this is going to be historically true for any religion, and of the religions in Europe at this time, you pretty much got Catholicism and Judaism. And then you get some other shit that you'd get killed for if you talked about. That like it's so like, yeah, it would absolutely seem to track that they would do a harmonization or a mental gymnastics to justify so on so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what was the last line that was read so far?
27.
Okay, I just wanted to make a point that in 14 there's another reference to time, and I'm starting to get more and more interested in any indication of like how far into the journey we are, and it appears as though it's 1 day per canticle, and so yeah, Virgil is trying to pace it, I think, so that they can make it out of hell by dawn.
Well, I also found a couple of scholars who argue that the cantos, even though it doesn't match up to the number of hours in a book of hours, he was using certain book of hours references to mark where the canto was, to delineate the passage of the clock, because it was by the prayers and by candles that you mark the passage of hours in this time period. So where he lived, where there were several monasteries, he could have told what time of day it is by what chants he was hearing over the walls.
And apparently, as he's doing his pacing, he points out in 16, 17, and 18 that there are 3 more circles that are sort of concentrically aligned inside of where they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why I said that a lot of scholars draw that as not only a comparison of hell, but they draw it as a real life comparison of, as you have seen, that he's trying to draw a parallel of what came before, so comes after, with the concentric symmetry of the
also
circles coming.
Populated, right? Because each one of these rings is they're going to be concentrically getting smaller, of course, because it's a funnel, but it's still like, these are long distances that they're traveling, right? And in these circles that are got to be thousands of miles long, are still tightly packed with souls. So that gives you an idea of how many people are in each one of these.
Do you mean, forgive me, just because I want to know what you mean specifically. Do you mean thousands of miles in circumference or in diameter? Because both are technically accurate.
Well, they're walking along the curve, right? So it would have to be
Circumference,
diameter.
okay. No, you mean...
circumference, yeah.
Yeah.
Circumference.
Okay, I was just making sure I was understanding what you mean, because I'm like, yeah, but they're not just like fucking cutting corners. They're walking the long way. But yeah.
Right. So Eucharist. Earlier we were talking about the city of Dis and how they were constantly making. I can't remember if it was left or right turns. I'm always messing that up. But they were constantly. Let's say it was left turns. They're constantly making left turns because they were following a circle or a spiral. But then with the city of Dis, suddenly they make a right turn, and it's because they're following the circumference of the city of Dis and not of hell writ large. And so, like and it's the only time they take a right turn instead of a left turn. So it sort of gives you an indication that they are following the curve, like all the way down.
Yeah.
And also that they play D&D because they didn't go to the left.
Yeah.
Well, there's that too, but it's also it's showing that Dis was also a level of obstruction, because to create a contraflow like this, it also took the visitation of an angel. Which this is also one of these things where I think he's trying to draw every level of, this is fucking important, pay attention to that section as he can. Like, that's really what it feels like to me. Because he has so many lanterns and hats hung on that canto, it's insane. To put it into a theater term.
On the violence point, I see what you're driving at, because I think it's obvious, as you said, that the church has engaged in and celebrated various kinds of violence. But I don't know that this is as hard of a turn as that, in the sense that I think if we stick around until Paradiso, we're going to see people who end up in paradise who not only engaged in like actual acts of violence, but are perhaps even celebrated for certain holy acts of violence. And so I think one of the interesting things about one of the reasons I love this canto and Sayer's commentary on it is Dante is pulling together two really interesting different ethical theories from Aristotle and from Cicero. So in book 7 of the Ethics, Aristotle sets up this distinction between basically vices of incontinence and vices of bestiality. And so an incontinent person is somebody who's just simply not able to resist what we might think of as a natural temptation common to all of us. So sins of incontinence in Dante's hell are like, the lustful, which is the first circle, and it's the first circle because everybody can understand what it's like to be lustful, and actually it's a natural passion, and it's very easy to fall into. Bestial sins are very different, and this is what Dante conflates with violence in the way that Cicero uses it. That's not exactly what Aristotle means, so I'll just read a little section from Aristotle. This is book 7 of the Nicomachean Ethics, chapter 5. He says, some things are naturally pleasant, and some of these are pleasant without qualification, while others correspond to differences between kinds of animals and of human beings. Other things are not naturally pleasant, but deformities or habits or base natures make them pleasant. And we can see states that are about each of these things that are similar, and states that are about naturally pleasant things. By bestial states, and this is like one of the most shocking parts of Aristotle for me, the examples that he gives. By bestial states, I mean, for instance, the female human being who is said to tear pregnant women apart and devour their children, or the pleasures of some of the savage people around the Black Sea who are reputed to enjoy raw meat and human flesh, while some trade their children to feast on, or what is said about Phalaris, which is a very similar thing, pedophilia and cannibalism and all sorts of stuff. And so Aristotle is saying there's this certain type of thing that we can see certain humans take pleasure in that most of us can't understand. We're like, I wouldn't find that pleasurable, but they do. There's something gross about that. And then the Cicero that Aristotle is pulling in is from De Officiis, or On Duties, book 1. section 41, where he sort of sums up two different ways injustice can be done. And I think that's what's important to qualify, is that like these are punished as sins, not necessarily because they're violent, but because they're sins of violence, or they're unjust uses of violence. So what Cicero says is there are two ways in which injustice may be done, either through force or through deceit. And that's setting up the rest of the Inferno, as we've already seen, right? We've got the violent sins first, and then the fraudulent sins below that. And the deceit seems to belong to a little fox and force to a lion. Both of them seem almost alien to a human being. In other words, he's saying both deceit and force, used the way a fox and a lion use them, is bestial, not human. But deceit, he says, deserves a greater hatred. And out of all injustice, nothing deserves punishment more than that of men who, just at the time when they are most betraying trust, act in such a way they might appear to be good men. If you guys are Machiavelli people, it's fun because Machiavelli inverts Cicero here, where he says actually the best ruler is the person who does use deceit and at the same time appears to be a good man, where Cicero says that's the worst kind of human being, actually, is somebody who uses deceit.
And yes, but that's because Kikero was a fucking Jupiterist, and there's all kinds of other shit that go into that. There's being part of the cult of Jupiter is a dramatic fucking thing that we do not have time to go into.
My overall point is just we should pay attention to when violence pops up later on and is perhaps praised in certain people who are either in purgatory on the way to paradise or are in paradise.
Yeah, and I think you can see this often, that it's the same thing. Like with you'll see lust in hell, but then you'll also see lust in purgatory, which is the very last step to making it to heaven. That lust is just a twisted version of love, and love is of course a good thing. And constantly you're ways in which hell sort of mirrors heaven, like sometimes literally. Like, so what we talked about with Dis, the reason Dis like encircles the other way, this may be a reflection of epicycles, right? That we see in the heavens, where the planets aren't going in a perfect circle. They sometimes have their own little circles, and like Dis is one of those epicycles, but reflected in hell.
No, and absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What I find interesting is because in the very next, maybe not the very next, the second, the tercet after the next, he describes violence that can be done to God, to self, and to one's neighbor. This to me seems to indicate that he's talking about specifically forms of unjustified or unholy violence, because he's saying,
no, I agree. I was just pointing out that he's also pointing to the church's hypocrisy with this, and multiple scholars.
I was responding mainly to what Eucharist was saying, because yes, it does seem that there is what you're saying about the future canticles with Paradiso and Purgatorio having people of violence there. Like, it seems to be making a distinction between justified and unjustified violence, or holy and unholy violence, because here again he's talking about violence against God, violence against self, and violence against one's neighbor, all of whom in theology are, these are the people that you are supposed to be considering, if not holy, you are supposed to be treating with good
reverence is the word you're looking for.
Yeah, reverence, thank you. Yes. And so this to me does seem to be like, these are the people that you were not supposed to be violent to, that you have been. And so that is, as far as the sorry, my words are not coming well today.
You're fine, bud.
As far as the epicycles Rich was talking about, this seems to be more of a, at least in my view, more like moons around a planet, so a planetary system within a solar system. So if the center of Dis is like a planet in its orbit around the center of hell, then these are the suborbitals of the moons of...
Yeah, that would be very accurate, because Dis is a moving city.
We're aware of non-terrestrial moons. That would be something I'd consider, but I don't think he was, right?
I would have to look it up.
He wasn't aware.
I believe they had they had knowledge of at least some of the Jovian moons at this point, since some of the earliest forms of telescopy had been invented by now.
For
So like
centuries. Yeah.
yeah,
Correct me
so
if I'm wrong, but I thought that was Galileo like first observed this.
No,
Is
no,
that
no,
not?
NASA
no, no.
says at
Could
least.
be wrong.
NASA says 1610 Galileo observed
Right.
Jupiter's moons.
so
Well, I'm pretty sure. No, I'm pretty sure
we
we were aware of not Jupiter's moons, but I think we were aware of Phobos prior to 1600 because of the shines we can get off of that moon at certain times around Mars. But that would have been done through pinhole telescopy, but which is a drastically different thing. But immaterial, because I think what he's saying is still accurate, because even if they are not truly understanding of non-terrestrial moons, they were understanding of the moon. And while they still believed in geocentrism, because they had the idea of a moon around one planet, they absolutely could have understood the idea of a moon around another planet. This is not conceptually, like alien to them. Like it would not, it's not something that would just be like, no, 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 that's not blue, that's red. Like it wouldn't break their brain like that. This would be very simple concept to extrapolate. So it still makes sense, and especially with when we factor in that the city of Dis moves. It moves in circle. So it is quite literally orbiting fucking Satan in this. So this would make perfect sense to what Ancom is saying, in my opinion.
And just FYI, Deimos and Phobos were not officially considered discovered until 1877. 1610 was the first official, but there is some indication that that either Ganymede or Callisto may have been noted by a Chinese astronomer as early as 364 BC.
We'll be here all day on this because ancient astronomy is a passion of mine, and I am going to dig into this because I know we knew of moons in BCE times because there are other cultures that literally marked them on stone. How they knew about them, no fucking clue. If they just dreamt it up one night, I have no fucking clue. But I know I've seen it marked on stones, so it tells me that somebody knew something. Like what they were interpreting it as, if it was a dream, if it was actually seeing stuff with pinhole telescopes, no fucking clue. That I'll dig into later because that's going to be hours. Yeah. Thank you for giving me freaking 2 days worth of work, Ancom.
You are very welcome. I can't wait to see what you find.
You're welcome.
Well, because there's actually programs that we have access to now.
I just put pictures of my today's cup, all right, and it's like definitely a reflection of heaven.
Beautiful.
Well, but we have programs where you can rewind the sky and see the sky that these people saw.
Oh yeah, I actually love using those because it so quick side tangent, I will make this as quick as possible. It actually showed me something that I hadn't realized, which is that the astrological calendars that people use for star signs have not been updated in 2 millennia. The star
More
sign,
than
the dates of star signs that we use today put those constellations behind the sun on the wrong dates unless you go back about 2,000 years.
2,350 years to be precise, yes.
Yeah. Everyone who thinks they are, for instance, a Cancer today, because that is my star sign, if you go by
my wife's too,
current astrological dates, are actually Leos, and Geminis are Cancers, and so on and so forth, if you go by the current sidereal constellation patterns, which is why there's a very small minority of astrological people who go by the sidereal calendar rather than the
lunar
classical or traditional calendar.
Well, see, and this conflation comes, and this is why we can trace it back to when they stopped updating it, when they converted it to the lunar calendar.
Yeah, which is probably also why sometimes people will include the 13th star sign, which is Ophiuchus, the snake,
Mhm.
because it depends on whether or not the calendar you're using is lunar or solar based, and so whether or not they include a 13th month every so often when we get to a point where there are more lunar cycles in a
Yeah,
solar year.
and yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then what happened was they converted it to lunar. They lost the ability, or they lost the formula, the generational knowledge of how to continue to move it. And then when they switched it to the solar calendar, where we had to have the equinoxes and solstices on set days of the year, it then further conflated it into what we have today. And it wasn't until I think it was 1940 something that we discovered that we had lost the math and been wrong all that time.
Yeah, and I'm guessing the switch from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, since there was about a 2-week loss of days there, since they realized they had been incorrectly calculating leap years for so long, also played into that.
I'm not certain on that, but it makes sense. And who would like to take up reading next? You want to take it on, Eucharist? We're on line 28.
28.
Top
so
of
all
top,
the first
top,
cir-
Yep, top of the screen
Okay.
is what. Yeah, I always move it to where we are on this screen. So, but
Perfect.
some of these
And,
guys read out of their own books and things, so I give them a line number.
and then how far
They
should I go
until
here?
39.
Yeah,
About
then that
39. Okay, perfect.
Break.
All right. All the first circle of the violent is, but since force may be used against 3 persons in 3 rounds, 'tis divided and constructed. To God, to ourselves, and to our neighbor can we use force. I say on them and their things, as thou shalt hear with reason manifest. A death by violence and painful wounds are to our neighbor given, and in his substance ruin and arson and injurious levies. Whence homicides, and he who smites unjustly, marauders and freebooters, the first round tormenteth all in companies diverse.
okay. So now this is something that I find interesting because he lists arson and to a modern eye, oh, obviously arson's a fucking crime. That makes sense. People do not realize how bad arson is in the fucking 13th and 14th century. This could take down whole cities. A single act of arson trying to get rid of evidence of a crime could kill an entire city. This is like, oh, some kids playing with fire and lighting trash can on fire. Whole town gone. Shit like that has happened. I'll point to the Chicago fire of the 1800s where literally a cow kicked over a lantern and burned down 3/4 of one of the biggest cities in America. Fire is very bad at this time period for those of you who don't really study history and don't look into this. Arson, very, very bad.
No Ben Franklin yet, right? To invent the public fire station.
Yeah.
Well, I
Fire
mean,
brigade.
we had technically had like fire brigades and stuff like that prior to Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin is the one that standardized that every city would have a standing one rather than like a cycling one. Because before Ben Franklin, what would happen would basically names would be drawn out of a hat, and 3 people would be done for 3 months at a time in multiple cities around New England.
So do you think Ben ended up like redesigning hell, right? Like that circle kind of moves up now because the consequences of starting a fire are slightly less than they were
That
before.
would be a conversation for another day. Does the topography
Ben
of hell
Franklin,
change?
Architect of Hell. What
Yeah,
a great novel that would be.
I mean, it would be a great conversation to have. Does the topography of hell change with the way that our understanding of like these moral truths and things change, so on and so forth? Like, does that all
I think I
move?
mentioned this before. I have a friend of the family, a friend of my mom's, who wrote a book uh, uh, that was basically a riff on the Inferno. And one of the levels of hell is where doctors go, and their contrapasso is that they have to sit in a waiting room for all eternity.
That would be my contrapasso would be put me in a kitchen with no seasoning.
Yep. There you
Sorry.
go.
Now that being said, like I'm glad we stopped there because
No,
this
we'll
is
give you salt and mayonnaise. Those will be your seasonings.
no, don't do that.
Same three magazines, by the way, like for all eternity.
Yeah, but you realize you just gave me egg, salt, and freaking like white pepper and all that, right? So like you just gave me enough seasoning. I can do a lot with those two things. Like shit, man.
These are just three different months worth of highlights for kids.
Oh God, no! And all the jumbles and all the connect the dots are done.
Maybe an expired version of Time.
No, you know what? Because those can be interesting. Like I actually go to back when libraries still carried shit like this. I would go back and read old copies of Time and old copies of National Geographic. That could still be interesting. No. You had it right the first time. The only thing I'm going to change it to, it's not highlights. It's a Watchtower.
Oh, yeah.
You have 3 copies of Watchtower in your waiting room. There you go. We've just
that
made.
Depends on whose hell that you're in, like which religious hell you're in.
Well, JWs don't really have a concept of hell, so this just works. Their books are everywhere.
Oh, right.
Now that being said, the injurious levies is another thing that we need to take into account, because this is essentially a 13th or 14th century way of saying property crime, like general property crime. So like the most obvious one that I have from a historical record on this was the injurious levities between 2 kings, and that was the kings of France and England when one stole another one's deer. This was literally on historical documents for war. So this is something that like we today we would think of this as like a community crime as opposed to property crime. This would be, disruption to the community, misanthropy, etc. Back then it was pretty much any property crime that would have been viewed as property, because property was viewed very differently in the 12th or 14th century, because this is like during the concept of like private and public property being like intermingled and like actually like finited out to each other in a way that, at least in Europe, had not been done for 500 years. So definitely outside living memory. And then I figured
What's interesting here is that the Italian word used, toilette, is cognate with the word toll, like a toll road. So I find it interesting. I guess the concept of a toll in the 1300s must have been a bit different than how we.
Well, a toll was not a problem. An injurious toll would be. So, for example, this is another one I can bring from historical records, with this one fully within England. There was injurious levies on tolls put between York and Scotland at one time period, where crossing between the two areas would cost so much that it prevented almost all trade, to the point where it was actually causing like starvation in regions and shit like that. So that would be considered an injurious levy of toll. I forget the guy's name who did that, but it was some fucking earl up in the north of England who fucked shit up. And I'd have to ask somebody like Lonerbox, who's more familiar with Scottish history, but I think they ended up killing something like 4,000 or 5,000 people to starvation because of the practice. Because it was like a city, like a couple of fairly large cities had high death counts because of the practice. Now that being said, as we get into the next section, this is going to be kind of cementing the things that me and Rich love to go over on modern politics, which is just and unjust conflict, which is one of these things that has been a constant conversation, I think would be a fair way to put it, in the Catholic Church for about 14 centuries now. It's a long conversation.
Yeah, depending on the conflict.
And I think this is Dante showing us what a 13th century Florentine would have viewed as just and unjust in a more visceral way than we generally see put. Mainly because he good.
In the Musa column, I tried to bold the distinctions between that he's trying to make here between violence against the deity, as opposed to violence against your fellow man and stuff like that, or whatever. I tried to break it out as best I could. The first round, the second round, and the third round.
Would you like to take next, Rich?
Yeah, sure. What line are we starting at?
We're at 36.
36.
Wait, no.
Okay.
Wait, 36. I messed up there. What the hell?
36 is the third line of a tercet.
Yeah, sorry, 37.
Which you can start. You can't, like in Dante, it happens quite often. A new thought does start inside of a tercet sometimes.
Yeah, I know, but I messed up because I had it on the small screen, and for some reason it looked like that was a 35, not a 36.
I think I read all the way to diverse at the end of line
Yeah.
39 is where I stopped. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
I'll
was
start
just having no. We had you stop after injurious levies. I was having to start here because this gets into the just versus unjust,
Okay, I
like
can
in
repeat it,
full
that's fine.
entirety. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whence homicides and he who smites unjustly, marauders and freebooters in the first round, tormenteth all in the companies diverse. Man may lay violent hands upon himself and his own goods, and therefore in the second round must perforce without avail repent. Whoever of your world deprives himself, who games and dissipates his property, and weepeth there where he should jocund be. Violence can be done the deity, in heart decaying and blaspheming him, and by disdaining nature and her bounty.
Heart
Should I stop
denying,
there?
not decayed. Yeah, heart denying, not
Oh, wait.
decaying. But both technically
Sorry.
would be poetically
Yeah,
valid here.
heart denying and blaspheming him.
Well, I mean, especially in the 13th, 14th century, that would have been viewed as a decaying or a hardening of the heart. So both would have worked.
Right, right. And capitalized him in all three translations. But
Oh, absolutely.
interestingly, not an opportunity to do that in Italian because the word him would just be subsumed into a suffix within a.
And I'm not positive, but I think that other word was jocund. I've only seen it a few times, and I never see like pronunciations for it.
What did I say?
Jocund, which I think might be accurate. I just don't know. I've always said jocund in my head. I've never had anybody.
Pronunciation dictionary says both are acceptable. I think jocund is the UK, but they're both acceptable. But jocund is the more common one.
That happens sometimes. My parents. I'm the first American in my family, so the King's English like slips in every once in a while. Which, by the way, I noticed the other day, like last week, I said the King's English for the first time. Which is a little bit sad.
Jocund is the more English pronunciation. Jocund is the more American pronunciation.
It's like waft and waft. My wife still will not accept waft as an American pronunciation, but it is an official American pronunciation.
I blame Daniel Webster. Okay, he's the one who decided to make American different.
Wafting something. I'm gonna stop myself. I'm gonna get myself canceled. Like
Well,
because
here, just let me get you a washcloth and everything will be fine.
Yeah. Now, those are legitimate American pronunciations. Not made up Daniel Webster ones.
Sorry, you just made both. You just made both Ancom and I fucking cringe because we both spent time in New England.
Hey, we all decided
I live there.
You missed this.
You spent a lot more.
We have decided that there's certain words that Despy like owns whenever they pop up in here. One of them is yonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lamentations is mine because,
All right.
and the lamentations of their women.
This section goes to what you were saying just a moment ago about this like conception of property as like an extension of self. The idea that you could commit a crime against not just yourself but your property, like that you could be profligate, gamble it away. That like that's like some sort of like thing that we should
Yeah,
care about is just like wild to us. Like it's hard to convince people that
well,
that's a problem, but this
well,
conception of
because
it is an extension of yourself.
in this time period, um, pretty much, I'd say I'd have to look up the numbers for all of them that live to adulthood, but I think it's something like 95% of people had kids unless they were barren. So like this comes from a time period where the idea that's not yours, that's the family's. It's
But also
not
this
just your
breakdown-
property, it's your family's property. Go
This
ahead, Rich.
breakdown of
But-
the 3 rounds. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say then, and we're not just talking just like nuclear family. We're talking generational households, like where grandparents and great grandparents,
Sometimes cousins, sometimes yeah,
cousins.
yeah.
Your what is it? Second aunt twice removed.
Yeah, and that's why this kind of property crime mattered, because it wasn't just you that you were screwing over. Go on, Rich, with your point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just for the topography of this, I just wanted to remind people we're talking about 1 circle, but 3 rounds. There's 3 rounds inside of the circle, and the circle is violence. The rounds are violence to God, violence to self, and then violence to one's neighbor. And when you're talking about property, a little bit earlier, just kind of reminded me that the way that we understand sin sometimes colloquially is not the same as, like, for instance, I had a Cistercian monk once explain to me, I was trying to confess to being lazy, but what I said was, I guess I was trying to be fancy and using the names of all the sins, because I was confessing sloth, and he said, but I was describing laziness, and he corrected me because laziness was a sin against the self, right? But sloth is a sin against God. What he said is you can definitely not be lazy but still slothful. Like, for instance, you could be washing your car instead of going to mass, in which case you're not being lazy because you're washing your car. It's probably easier to go to mass than it is to wash your car, but you are neglecting a duty to God, right? So you're in a different round, essentially. You're not committing a sin against the self, which is what laziness would be. You're committing a sin against God, which presumably puts you lower.
Yeah, and I just like to I go back in time and argue with Dante that he needs to completely reverse this shit, because he's got this shit backwards. Honestly, if you were talking about benefit to society as a whole, you got it backwards. Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong, all 3 of them belong where he has them,
but society
but it just needs to flip them. I know.
Yeah, it's just, but he values God.
I know. I want to go back and argue with them, though. I'd have to learn 14th century Italian, but I want to go back and argue with them, because it's like, wait a minute, you were so good on all this other humanist shit, and then you fuck this one up.
Eucharist, have you read The Great Divorce?
Yeah.
So there's that point where the mother wants to go get her son out of, well, she wants to join her son in heaven, but he cannot go into heaven. She cannot go into heaven unless she loves God more than she loves her son. She cannot do that, and therefore she then asks to take her son back to hell with her, which sort of, there's some irony in that, right? And she loves him so much she wants to bring him to hell. But but that therein lies the difference of prioritizing God over even one's neighbor or even one's child.
Yep.
Which I'm sure will drive Jack crazy.
Yes, very much so. For multiple reasons that we will not get into, because we'll be here until you have to leave.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, he's in that case, he's riffing off Dante, I believe, in that passage.
Yeah.
Which a lot. I mean, The Great Divorce is pretty much a reinterpretation of Dante anyway.
No, I mean, I could absolutely see that. For me, it is.
But there is a selfish kind of love, right? Or some twisted version of love that is selfish. right? That
No,
doesn't
no, no, no.
prioritize God or one's neighbor or
That is, we have
the love of
colloquial.
self that's properly done.
Yeah, we have colloquially harmonized it to love. Oh, they loved them too much and they were unstable. No, that's not love.
They loved them in the wrong kind of way. Yeah.
No, it's not love. That is possessiveness. That is ownership. That is proprietorship. That has nothing to do with love. What those people are doing, that has to do with power. And that is colloquially, we have fucked this up where, oh, that stalker, he loved the woman too much. No, he was fucking
Lewis
trying.
would agree with you there. I think Lewis agrees with you there.
Oh, he does in his later works outside of the Great Divorce. So like,
but I think even in Great Divorce, like to me, it sounds like he's saying what you just said.
But he still
he has, like,
uses the
Augustinian,
harmonization.
Disordered affections, right? Disordered desires that, like, I think he would say, like I think Lewis would take the line that, like, there are people who are worried within Christianity, very certain types of Christianity particularly, that they might love their child or their spouse so much that they'll fall into idolatry. And I think he would take the line that, like, that's your problem is never that you're loving them too much. Like it's
yeah. I mean, and like I said, he explains himself much better in later works, or technically just other works, because some of them came before the Great Divorce. But at least the way he words it in the Great Divorce, he leads many, including my father, into the interpretation that this is still a form of love, to the point where my father used to actually like defend stalkers of, oh, they love that person, they're just unstable and need to get some help so that they learn social cues. And I'm just what the hell?
Let me give two quick responses to that. One of them is, I think that scene is from the point of view of the mother, so she's going to describe it as love, and we as the reader are supposed to sort of understand like how she's deceiving herself.
No, like I said, no, I agree. Lewis explains himself much better.
But also, number two, as this was explained to me by like a local archbishop, like here in the Dallas area, one time when he was discussing Dante, and he was saying that lustful relationships of the kind that you see described in at the tip of Mount Purgatory may not themselves be love, all right, or it's described as disordered love by Dante, but they can lead to the real kind of love, which is why the church never says, okay, you started off in a life of sin, you're living with each other without being married, and maybe you even started with a one-night stand, right? But that relationship eventually grew into something more noble, and the church recognizes that that kind of disordered love, which isn't love at all, can grow into like legitimate true love, and that might be one of the reasons sex works the way that it does.
Yeah, and we all know what Stockholm syndrome is now. We know better. Like, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. It was a joke. I couldn't resist.
I'm not talking about abusive love.
Yeah, no, I know. I couldn't resist because you left it so perfect for me to say it.
Unless you acknowledge that lust is the abuse of self, right, as well as the abuse of others.
It is, by the way, and that is a better point to say than my joke was.
Yeah.
But my joke was funny because it got everybody, including Eucharist, to grin. Now, that being said, it is for Dante, this makes sense to me. Dante is a poet in this sense. Poetically saying this as a disordered love, that is a colloquialism that 100% is something somebody can resonate with. The problem is when people say it like this and it's not in poetic form, it gets misconstrued as this is really what it is. And that is, at least in modern times, very problematic. It was probably always problematic, but definitely since we know better, it's problematic. So it's one of those things where I feel the need to point it out when older poems like Beowulf does this too, by the way. Because it talks about the overwhelming love of Grendel's mother, blah blah blah. It gets into all that kind of crap. So I feel the need to point it out because so many people today do not have that understanding because they take colloquial meanings as gospel. And
yeah.
Rich, you and I know, and actually Eucharist, you did the debate panel circuit for long enough. You know exactly the assholes I'm talking about.
I think the thing that sort of resolves this is maybe just an ambiguity of the word, as you're saying, in the sense that this, to the extent that Dante is pulling this from Augustine, and then the whole tradition, Augustine's Latin term for this is the ordo amoris, the order of affections. But amoris in Latin has a semantic range that includes everything from kind of ugly, lustful kind of attraction to a kind of neutral, this is just a draw or a desire that I have, to the thing that we're calling love proper. And so I think, Dante and Augustine would agree, when something is not in its proper order, it's not that kind of thing we're calling love. It would still be an attraction or a draw or a desire, but it's different than the love that you're describing.
Well, they were finite by but they were also finite by
the Latin or Greek.
He did Latin. Yeah, he didn't know Greek
well,
very well, actually.
Yeah, he actually had to have many of he had to have many of the Greek texts translated into Latin for him for his work on City of God Against the Pagans, for example.
He learned Greek, but not well. And he probably didn't read Plato directly, or only one Platonic dialogue, which is my other favorite thing. But
wait, that means I too could be a doctor of the church.
You could. You absolutely.
Because I know Latin, but not. I learned Greek, but not well.
Yeah, there you go. You're set.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like when it comes right down to it, Augustine, the first apologist. We'll get into that another day, because you're right that
to me, apologist is not a dirty word.
It should be.
Yes.
Well, because we should be drawing the distinction. Theologian is the non-dirty word. Apologist should be dirty because that's somebody who's willing to lie to make their point. A theologian is going to be able to make their point without having to lie.
I don't think Eucharist has heard this novel definition of yours.
Oh no, I guarantee you he has.
I've gotten a little bit of it here and there. I haven't had a chance to read the book you sent me yet.
Well, but it's not just that. I guarantee you this is not a new concept to him because he talks about religion. He's used to dealing with apologists.
Discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I went through the whole Ray Comfort thing, so I know what you're talking about. I just again,
there are many
semantic
apologists
range.
who lie.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm gonna get more coffee. I'll be right back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be back too.
Yeah, and that's the only distinction.
Bring back the pot. I want to see his. I love Mocha Masters. I think they're beautiful.
Yeah, for me, it's I believe that now that we understand this distinction very clearly, we need to start applying it retroactively to delineate the good theologians from the bad apologists, because there are good theologians even going back to the 2nd century, and there's bad apologists going back just as far as well.
See, here's the difference. Is I would argue, for instance, that Marcus is an apologist for vaccines. I do not think that Marcus lies.
Yeah, I wouldn't call him an apologist for vaccines because I have never once heard him give misinformation. He'll absolutely tell, no, you have this health risk.
But you're sneaking your definition into.
But he also.
I don't think he lies. I don't think he lies. I don't think he does misinformation. I don't think he does any of that. But I would argue that he's an apologist for vaccines.
Yeah, I know, but that's because you like the word.
Well, it's not that I like it or dislike it. I'm just using it in the way that it's historically been used. Yours is the first definition that. Yes, because you don't it to where you're lying.
No, it's not the first. This has been argued for many years, but that's another conversation. You're right. Because it's just one of those things that we do need to draw this distinction, because too often then we get people like Dr. Frank Turek, who people call a theologian, who is absolutely an apologist and lies constantly and uses his doctorate to support his lies, and people take it as gospel because they don't have the time to go do the research that he says he did. That's my issue, and that's why I think we do need to draw the distinction between the two.
Right, but that's why I would just call him a bad apologist, which, by the way, you use that term too, right? And if your definition were the definition, then that would just be a redundant.
I'm saying because it is changing, and as we are understanding more modern scholarship, my rule that I talked about earlier, that even Eucharist kind of nodded his head about, the people who sign those doctrines of faith, that they will not admit evidence that is contradictory to their faith.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
I agree with that too.
Yeah, and we need to start drawing that distinction.
I just don't think they're the only apologists in the world. Is all.
Yeah.
No, there's non-religious apologists, by the way. This is also true.
Yeah. but there's also like there are non-religious. There are people who argue in favor of non-religious things that the classical definition of apologist would apply to, but the definition of apologist that you specifically are using, Jack, is one of dishonesty in arguing for
It, in the modern sense, for the last 100 years, this would be 100% accurate. You can argue some novel levels of naivete on knowledge, lack of information on some of the previous generations, but at least the last century, where we are literally seeing people argue things that we have 100% debunked as still true. No, that they are the ones creating this distinction.
I really think this would make a great panel. In and of
It
itself.
would
The argument.
more salon than panel, but yes, because this is one of those things. If
Well,
it's
salons usually involve wine, so I'm in.
yeah, we're good. Well, my thing is I want people with actual education, not just opinions, because this is one of
Right.
those things. This is you
Right.
can't fuck around with this one and be right. You have to actually know your shit. Okay. That being said, let's get back to Rudy so before we end up having to lose you. And I'd say, says that,
I've got maybe an hour
Ancom or
left in me.
yeah,
yeah.
Ancom, I believe you're next, and I believe we're starting on line 49.
All right, and going to
Looks like the stopping point would be 66.
okay. Therefore, oh, sorry, I was reading new stuff. And for this reason, doth the smallest round seal with its signet Sodom and Cahors, who in disdaining God speak from the heart. Fraud, wherewithal is every conscience stung. A man may practice upon him who trusts, and him who doth no confidence imburse. This latter mode, it would appear, dissevers only the bond of love which nature makes, wherefore within the second circle nestle. Hypocrisy, flattery, and who deals in magic, falsification, theft, and simony, panders, and barrators, and the like filth. By the other mode forgotten is that love which nature makes, and what is after added, from which there is a special faith engendered. Hence, in the smallest circle, where the point is of the universe upon which this is seated, whoe'er betrays forever is consumed. God damn.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that he includes magicians and lawyers in that's what barrators are, is lawyers. So he agrees with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't resist when you read through that. It made me grin because I was just like, yep, even Dante fucking knew.
So I assume this is a preview of circles to come, right? Because he goes all the way to 9. But I guess I mean we're not in 9 yet, right? We're still
Right, they're just kind of looking. Oh, am I still? No, yeah. They're just kind of looking down over the edge, and he's just like, "That's that."
Well, remember
Charting
this
our future course, you know.
where we ended the last canto and where we began this one. They had basically taken a seat and they're looking down at the valley because they're trying to acclimatize themselves to the stench, because they passed this and the stench was so empowering. Dante took a step backwards.
And I do love how the fact that he uses the real science of how like you reach a saturation point in the nose, to where like you become accustomed to sin to the point where you don't notice it, which makes sin particularly insidious. I just really love that about how that's described.
Rich trying to trigger me again.
Wait, what? Why? How's
Well,
that triggering you?
because many of the things that people view as sin, I would not, because of that. This is what I mean. Don't do it.
Oh, I didn't say anything about any particular sin. Although I will say, when he talks about number 8, I do love the fact that fraud is like so deep into hell, right? Because in the same way that you that the nose like reaches a saturation point, fraud in particular is the kind of sin that as well. The reason it's like it's counterfeiters are in that level, and we'll get to that point when we do. But
So
when you're breaking down the system, you're making it so the whole system itself cannot work. Um, uh, then your sin, just like how the fire can spread throughout, like the city in a medieval city, it's the same way. Like if you cannot trust society, if the very mores and foundations of society itself cannot work, not to make it too political, but we've had these conversations about Trump, about how a lot of what he's running against is the system itself, and your risks get very very high when you get to that
Well,
point.
yeah, I mean, we could remove the modern politics and just show like this has happened so many times throughout the past where you are so contra flow that you are uh, imprudent in your actions and create levels of instability and confounding variables that you could never have accounted for. I mean, I'll point to freaking Nero for a prime example in history because it's one that everybody knows and is universally like, yeah, it was his fault. There's a few other people, but yeah, he was the main blame.
So I think with barriters, you may have been confusing it with barristers,
Oh,
which is the
was I?
British term for a lawyer. Yeah, because barriters are in the modern sense is it's used to describe people who bring frivolous lawsuits. In a more classical sense, it refers to people who would sell like positions in the church or sell what's the word I'm looking for? Forgiveness for sins, indulgences.
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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
which
yeah. Well, this would be the same
it,
thing because this would be the violation of basically church law versus man's law. It'd be the same violation. So it's faithless lawyers would be the
yes,
argument there then.
but the Italian word barati is the lemma form of barato, which refers to barters or exchanges, swaps. So it's a barterer, but because he's giving it a particular context of sinfulness here, probably someone who
Well, yeah, but
would
if we go back to the original 100%, but we'd have to go by the 14th century interpretation of the word, because it's more than likely what Dante would have been using. Like just to be like frank, so it would probably be the ones who traded in church law or the ones who traded in man's law faithlessly or unscrupulously. That would be the way he's meaning it based on when he wrote it.
fair enough. I mean, I can't. I don't have an easy way to tell what the
None
14th
of us do.
century.
I'm just yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. That's what I'm base. And if you're saying that the classic before, like if we don't go all the way back to the root word, was frivolous lawsuits and people who traded in positions in the church, this would both be accurate because it's both violating law, just two different laws, one secular, one theological.
Yeah. So
Do we have Rich back?
Yeah, sorry, something came up.
No,
What were we
I was
talking
just
about?
making. Oh no, I was just making sure if you were muted or if you were talking to somebody else. I just wanted to check.
Yeah, sorry. I
Okay.
was trying to turn my head so that it was obvious, but maybe I didn't do that enough.
Sometimes you do that when you're looking at other stuff while you're talking, so that's why I just wanted to
Yeah,
check
sure.
before we moved on.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have stuff that you want to say that you forget you haven't unmuted yet.
Okay, so I bolded Sodom just to point out that Sodom was mentioned, right? But then I put a Wikipedia link for Cahors because I think a lot of people wouldn't know what Cahors was.
I honestly had to look it up just to be honest with you because I
Yeah.
had forgotten the reference.
But it's basically another Sodom, right? Like even though we all know that the sin of Sodom was that did not take care of the poor and homeless. However, uh, we do know that in popular culture, people think of Sodom as like just a place of sexual deviancy or whatever. And Cahors was another such city in France that had a similar reputation.
Yeah.
although our horrors based on the definition I was reading was less about sexual sin, more about usury. So it was known
Yeah,
for
that makes sense. Too
Well-
capitalistic.
Well,
Yeah.
to be more accurate, the sin of simony. That's why it was listed amongst these. Part of it. Like, people forget about that in modern times. It's way too damn often. I wish more modern Catholics would
Yeah, that
fucking
is
remember
Bruce's
that.
note as well, that it was usury and
That's what I'm going off of. Is Bruce's note. So.
yeah. Are you Chris? Are you seeing the footnotes I put in there? Like, if you just hover over the cell in the spreadsheet, it'll give you the note.
Yes, yeah, which is really useful.
Yeah, eventually we're gonna go back and we're gonna start putting like all the artwork and all that stuff through them as well.
That hence the digital apparatus. That's what
Yes. Yeah, when this thing is done, this thing will hopefully have way more than any one apparatus has, because it's including a bunch of different commentaries and sources and people who aren't even technically commenting on Dante but on the same historical time period, like Paget Pointin and so on and so forth. So now where we left off, forever is consumed those who are on the point. Like that is one thing. It seems like this particular point is emphasized as the worst of all, but this is not at the lowest level. Why is this this is the one that kind of like messed with me? Why is it this is viewed as like the most like eternal fire, no escape from? Even the lower circles do not have this implication, but it is given here.
Well, to be clear, like for Dante, there's the city of Dis, and then there's Dis, and Dis is Satan.
No.
He's the one at the very bottom, the point where he is at the circle that is a point. Like there.
Oh, so you mean
it's a
that you think this
singular
is the you think that this is only referring to Satan, not the people at the pinnacle of the city of Dis?
Yeah, the city of Dis is like what, level 5, somewhere around there, but it orbits Dis himself, who is Satan. He's just using Dis as a like another name for Satan, as a title or something for Satan, which is another reason why I don't think Plutus is Dis. Like I think he's a distinct character.
Yeah.
Because it is Satan who is himself Dis, and then the city just kind of orbits him. So he orbits him in the sense that the Earth spins.
So we can
he's
just
at the
start
center of
calling,
that spin.
yeah, we can just start calling Dis Satanville then. I'll
Yeah,
go back and rename that section. It's the roaming city of Satanville.
Yeah, that is essentially, yeah, exactly. I think that's what it is. Yeah, because I mean that's the line, right?
Well, see, the way I had interpreted it, because of the way that it was set up, just as we're leaving Dis, we're then getting to where the focal point of the legs would be. It seemed like the people under, or I said pinnacle, under the foundation of Dis were like the most damned in the way that it was worded, and that could just be my misinterpretation because of using Longfellow. That being said, it just like, that was one where I was like, seems odd that he puts so much emphasis here. Especially when he's talking about like the circles to come as if they're fucking like vile in comparison to even what he just went through.
Yeah, so Eucharist, we had a little bit of a discussion about why, before entering the city of Dis, one circle earlier, there is the character of Plutus. And we were trying to figure out whether this was Pluto, who would be Hades, right? Or if it would be Plutus, the god of wealth, which are two distinct gods in the Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology. And my argument is that they're distinct because Hades himself is actually renamed as Dis, and the city of Dis is not the same as the Plutus from the previous circle. And then
my understanding of this poem is mostly guided by the Dante's Inferno video game, in which Plutus appears as a giant golden statue. So I think the avaricious interpretation is appropriate.
Yes, yes.
Well,
That
Something
makes sense.
else I wanted to point out real quick is because of the confusion about whether or not we're talking about circles within the city of Dis or other like later circles of hell. It does point out in Sayer's commentary on line 16 that he's essentially that Virgil is essentially forecasting deeper circles of hell, specifically 7, 8, and 9. And I think that's backed up by the fact that we're talking about the the smallest circle at the center of the universe, or at the center of center of hell, wherein the person of Dis, that is to say Hades, or Satan, exists. So I think our earlier interpretation of circles within circles, or epicycles, or the whole
well, what we're trying to
lunar,
point out is that it would be both. It would be because we're pointing out the concentric circles within Dis, the concentric circles before Dis, and the fact that we had to go contraflow to go around Dis. It's we're trying to point out that Dante, like he does so goddamn often, is using multiple meanings within singular points.
I could see that
Literally goddamn often.
Yeah, the only issue I take with that is that we've already been out of Dis for at least one canto.
No, we technically were never in Dis. We went around Dis.
No,
I thought
they
they were
went into
inside
it, right?
it.
That's why.
No,
they
yeah,
needed
no,
to open gate to
the
get
outer
back out.
wall. Yeah, remember the way it was described. There's the inner wall and the outer wall. Basically, what we did was we walked the moat around the outside of Dis. We didn't walk through the city streets.
Okay.
So
In any case, like, we were already past Dis by the time we got to this point, so it seems more
Dis
likely
point.
in my interpretation
Yeah, I was
that
about to
from
say
this
that.
point
We
that
got
he's talking about future circles to come, and giving an early warning, as it were, rather than a description of the internals of the city. I guess I could see him doing both, but it seems more likely to
well,
me that
I
this
actually
is
argue all three because I think he is also trying to draw parallels of between the mortal world and the afterlife, and that there is the same level of if you are oblivious to the proliferation of so on and so forth. Like I think he's trying to
this
do
is
all
one
three.
Of the reasons, this is one of the reasons I dislike poetry. All of the overlapping meanings just make things.
Well, and
make
Dante,
things
then Dante and
confusing.
because they are the absolute masters at like quadruple and quintuple meanings within a single line.
Yeah.
And like in the Iliad, there is one line that a single commentary, 29 pages and come for one line.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, yeah, these
These dead fuckers really needed to learn how to just get to the goddamn point.
They're getting to points. They're rich points and layered points and multifaceted points.
very quickly
That's
that
not
they're relying on the information of the time period that the other people would have generally known, so that they too would have been able to get it from these very brief readings.
Okay, but that's not a point. That's goddamn paper mache, okay?
This is true too.
Right.
no.
So I think I lost somewhere along the way sort of what we were disputing, or what we were trying to figure out.
Well, what I had just asked about was why, and it had been answered, and we got into the dispute over Pluto and Plutus. And there's a slight distinction I will draw to what Rich said. He said that Pluto is the god of the underworld, Plutus is the god of wealth. This is slightly accurate, not fully accurate. Pluto is the god of the underworld and all wealth under the earth. So literally all veins of metal, any buried treasure, anything like that, anything that is under the ground belongs to Pluto. Plutus is the god that grants wealth to individual living souls. These are distinct within Greek mythology way back when, but it is lost by the 14th century in Italy and not relearned again for, what was it, 200 more years, Rich? Late 1500s?
Sure. Yeah, I just don't know how that. Not all knowledge of Greek ideas were lost. It's just that the language of
and certain bits of the myth
Greek was lost. Yeah.
and certain bits of the myth until we found the stuff out of
And
the
so
other
there were many
library.
misunderstandings of Greek
Yeah.
mythology until the fall of Constantinople, in which case those scholars made it back to the West.
Yeah, that's all I mean. So, like, that's why I think that Dante is the one that is slightly confused due to the information he is working on and the time period he is working on, and due to our much greater breadth of knowledge in modern times, it leads us to a level of confusion that would not have existed in the 14th century when he was writing this.
Listen, it's still ambiguous, right? Scholars still disagree on this, so like it's totally legitimate to think that Plutus is Pluto, or in this case, is Dis. But I'm just saying that this line 65, where he talks about the Earth essentially wrote down the throne of Dis. So now we have two references to Dis, one of them being the city and one of them being the throne, which is Satan himself. And so to me, that's one more piece of evidence that Plutus is not the same as this. But that doesn't mean it's impossible.
No, or multi-meaning and all these other things. Like this is why it needs to be talked about for the people who are watching this, and we need not go too far into it because we've done it 3 episodes now. They definitely have all the bases covered.
It keeps coming up every time Dante mentions Dis. It's like, is he talking about this, or this, or this?
Or Dis, yeah. Well, but
yes, Dis or Dis.
Well, but it is also like how he uses it and how it's translated into English is what partially causes why we have to question it, because unfortunately, not all of us can sit there and read it in Italian. So we are relying on interpretations of interpretations. Where else in history has that caused problems? Oh yeah, the same subject we're talking about.
To be fair, even when I'm reading it in Italian, like I'm going off more modern conceptions of these words, so like it's not always easy to understand what the.
And this is why I wish I had gotten Metatron for this. Yeah, like I said, this is why I wish I had gotten Metatron for this, since he is an Italian speaker, an Italian historian, and fucking and classical and ecclesiastical Latin speaker. He would know all this shit.
Yeah, like I'm barely conversational in Italian. He's probably far better at this than I.
Oh yeah, he's born in Sicily.
And I just want to add very quickly, this may be a coincidence, but where where the throne of Dis, who's at the center of hell, exists, is inside of a tercet that itself completes in line 66. Who knows if that means anything or if it's a total coincidence? I don't know.
No, I mean, it's one of those things where it could have been intentional, and we would then have to look at the pattern now because that you pointed that out. Did he also draw significances to other line 66s? Will he come to the same conclusion when we get to line 666, etc.? Like there's...
We passed line 666 a while ago.
Hold on a second.
Got 136 lines? Oh no. It varies slightly between between cantos and how many lines he has, but it's always over 100. So line 666 would have been in canto.
One second, I'm getting an error from YouTube, so let me relog. Open Studio. Okay, there it goes. Fucking weird. Okay, so. We should be back continuing where we left off, because hopefully where we left off and we weren't just staring at a blank screen for a while.
I do just that.
Just for the hell of it, I figured out line 101 in Canto 5 is line 666 of the whole poem, and it's love that on gentle heart doth swiftly sees this man for the person beautiful that was ta'en from me, and still the mode offends me. I don't know if he's talking about Beatrice here, or I don't think I was here for this one because none of this looks familiar to me.
Getting that same alert from YouTube. What the hell is going on? Oh, you don't need to see my exact
No, this is
location.
not Dante speaking. This is was it Dido that's speaking at this point? Yeah, I think that was Dido speaking. I don't see why Dido would be particularly infernal compared to all the other characters.
Okay. Anyways, yeah, I'm guessing it probably wasn't quite that
Okay, internet's not bad.
that involved.
People feel sorry for her, anyway.
Okay, I'm dropping frames again. Okay,
But
so
perhaps, I mean, perhaps putting the, putting dis at line 66 might have been intentional, but it seems probably just coincident.
Right.
He was intentional about a lot
Fortuitous
of
coincidence, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily that was one of those times.
Right.
again. Okay.
Perhaps putting the, putting dis at line 66.
Okay, it says we're dropping frames, but when I just checked YouTube, the video is fine, so we're just going to keep going and hope for the best. Hopefully it's just our video jumping as far as like frames, because the audio is coming through fine.
So I'll be leaving in 30 minutes. However, I can probably listen in the car for another 30 minutes. So whatever that's.
Oh, did you not get your earpods working so you can continue while you're in the car?
I haven't figured that out yet. For some reason, Discord does not seem to want to work with my earpods. It works on every other app, but not on Discord.
Interesting. All right, so I'll pick up where we left off.
Maybe Ancon can help me with that one of these days.
Yeah.
We'll see what I can do.
But tell me, those within the fat lagoon, whom the wind drives, and whom the rain doth beat, and who encounter such bitter tongues, wherefore are they inside the red city? Not punished if God has them in his wrath, and if not, if he has not, wherefore in such fashion? And unto me he said, why wanders so thine intellect from which is it wont? Or soothe thy mind where is elsewhere looking? Hast thou no recollection of those words which with which thine ethics thoroughly discusses the dispossessions three, that heaven abides not, incontinence and malice and insane bestiality, and how incontinence less God offendeth and less blame attracts? And if thou regardest this conclusion well, and to thy mind recallest who they are that outside are undergoing penance, clearly wilt thou perceive why from these felons they separated are, and why less wroth justice divine doth smite them with its hammer. Because we got to get that hammer in there now, because we actually haven't had the hammer yet. We get the spear later, but so essentially in my reading of this is Virgil dressing Dante down. Like, what the fuck are you looking back there for and asking stupid questions for? We got shit to pay attention ahead of us for. Like, this is what this feels like, is why, like, it feels like Virgil just looked back at him and like, quit asking stupid questions. Let's just get going. You know better.
What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah, I mean, like, really, because like he's like, your ethics, thoroughly discusses this shit. Like, why are you asking this question? You should know this answer.
And
Now
he
that could-
refers to Aristotle, right? When he says, have you forgotten how your ethics reads? He's talking about Aristotle's like Nicomachean ethics.
No, I agree. I'm just kind of pointing out that it's just like, this is Virgil dressing him down. Like, dude, we're this far into it and you're still asking dumb questions. I thought we were past this shit. Because
go ahead. It's something that he ought to know if he's opened the ethics, like the section I just read in book 7. Aristotle spends a lot of time on this. Like, it's not even a question, or should not be a question, why the people who fell prey to lust are different from the people who I've just described to you are fraudulent and malicious and doing things of sins of will and not of incontinence. Choosing to do the worst things that a human being can do, or even perverting themselves, the way that Aristotle describes it, through some process. They've become the kind of person who takes pleasure in things that most people can't even conceive of. Don't you just see obviously how that's worse than some dude who slept with his girlfriend, right?
And by the way, thanks for reminding me. I wanted to argue with Aristotle when you brought him up earlier, because he said that is unnatural, and then he said they're baser thing. It's like Ecclesiastes 3:18. It is the distinguishment that man is above animal, and that is just vanity in reality. And it even in the Bible that they're quoting to make such an assertion, it states to believe that man is above animal, it is vanity in and of itself. It is that kind of distinction. Their natural things are human instincts. Their baser instincts are animal instincts, is why I'm arguing with Aristotle on that.
Yeah, I mean,
to some degree, the distinction is arbitrary, right? Because we're just defining that, just like the same way we define art as anything that's man-made, right? If it's artificial, then it's man-made, and if it's natural, then it's not man-made. But it's sort of arbitrary, right? We just
had somebody argue with me
that be the definition of what is artificial.
Yeah, I had somebody argue with me that a painting by a gorilla could not be considered art because it wasn't created by human hands, and I was just like, "You're a fucking idiot. It's still artificial."
Well, I mean, the distinction that Aristotle is drawing on there is just the part of the soul that we have that he doesn't think animals have. That's contestable. You can read Alistair McIntyre's Dependent Rational Animals, and he thinks there are other rational animals like gorillas and dolphins. But the fact that that human beings can and do take pleasure in contemplation is something that he thinks we are distinct from animals in that way. Where the things that animals take pleasure in are the things that we share with animals, like food and sex. And so those things are bestial in a sense, and that's fine as long as that's not your highest good. But then there are other things that are he's saying bestial in a weirder sense, like it's things that animals do that we can't even understand why they do it, but certain human beings seem to indulge it too. Like animals will do horrific violence to each other and seem to enjoy it, and we think a good human being would not do that, and we label those people bad or bestial in some way. Yeah.
Well, and it was just a distinction I draw because it is a mistake that we make, that these are not natural actions. It's why people then led to all kinds of things of, oh, we can pray this shit away. No. We need therapy to therapy this shit away. Like, stop thinking that. Like, we need more work than just this, is kind of my point. Because this is natural.
Basically lumps them in the same category, right? They say these are things that cause us to contemplate aspects of ourselves, whether it be confession or therapy. But he says that both of those are essentially the same thing in his history of sexuality.
Interesting. I didn't think to bring up Foucault during Dante, but accurate. I love that grin out of Eucharist.
That's great. Why would we not bring up Foucault during Dante?
Well, I just hadn't thought of it.
Lots of Dante thoughts.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, we're talking about self-reflection, right? Which prayer causes us to do, therapy causes us to do, confession causes us to do, and there are probably many more activities that also cause us to self-reflect.
Well, yeah, and without going too much on a tangent into the things that we understand on cognition now compared to what they understood then, this is one of these things that if Dante lived today, I have the sneaking suspicion this would be a very different section than how he wrote it. It's one of those things that he was doing the best with what he had then, and it's all we can do at any time period in history. But at the same time period, I wish I could get Doc Brown to grab his DeLorean and take me back there and be like, hey, dude, here, read this. And like, just give him a book of like shit to come so he could actually see like what all the things we learn and everything, and like see how much this would change. Because I have the sneaking suspicion due to the humanistic aspects, and again, his humanism here is rebuffed by Virgil. He is asking, well, why is this worse than that? He is trying to get a more finited explanation from Virgil. And Virgil literally, like I said, just kind of shuts him down. But at the same time, like, this is Dante's humanism. He has compassion. Why this and not that? Why he wants explanation, because for some reason, to his mind, whether it is or is not just as immaterial, to his mind, it seems like there needs a greater explanation given as to why this is the way it is.
Yeah, this is a question that still happens, right? Protestants, especially evangelicals, will ask me all the time, why do you think some sins are worse than others? Why are there venial sins versus grave sins, for instance, in the Catholic Church? Because, like, the way evangelicals look at it, God is infinitely good, and anything next to infinity is equally bad. And so they're really, like, having gradations of sin makes no sense to them. And so to this day, we're having to answer questions like Virgil is having to answer here, which is, why are some sins worse than others?
Yeah, no, and that's kind of my point. That's the humanism, whether it's Catholic humanism or secular humanism, is immaterial. This is his humanism shining.
Is is stealing $2,000 from a person equal to cannibalism?
Right.
I mean, you would think that that's self-explanatory.
They're both felonies.
Until
They're
you,
both felonies.
well, unless you're in certain places in Oceanic region of the world, but I mean, I'll just point out, what's his name? Oh God, the Michael Rockefeller. Look at, for those of you in the audience and any of you on this panel who don't know about the story of Michael Rockefeller, have nightmares, because that's what's going to happen when you read about it. Yeah, this is one of the richest people in history that this happened to, by the way, as well, for all of you absolutely misanthropic lefties in my audience who will frickin' actually take joy in this dumb shit. Yeah, no, absolutely horrific story, but completely legal. Now, that being said, as we are getting to the end of this, we are now getting to where I said that we are seeing like a chink in Virgil. We're seeing Dante start to express seeing fault within Virgil. It's something he has not done up to this point, because up to this point he's basically hero worship Virgil. And he does not do it very much throughout the rest of the poem, but he does it here, and I think that that's significant. How? I'm not exactly sure, but the fact that it only happens 3 times in the entire freaking poem, it has to be significant in some way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, like, I just don't know how to interpret it beyond that, but Eucharist, got anything? Since you're even more studied on this than any of the rest of us.
I guess no, I need to think for a minute before I
No, you're fine.
things.
No, you're fine.
I mean, I think it's fair to point out that at this point in the poem, Virgil is still wiser than Dante is, right? So we can just assume that whatever doubts he's having about Virgil are probably unwarranted, but they might be the kinds of doubts that might occur to the reader, and so he's asking that so that we can get an explanation.
I mean, yeah, it could be that, or it could be like, showing, nobody's perfect, showing the chinks in the armor is kind of how I read it, because hero worship everywhere else, but then like reticent to take the word here. Human, like what I know from
Dante.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Well, it's interesting just narratively, because Dante in the poem like has this skepticism about why it's arranged this way, and Virgil just refers him back to the learning he should already have. There seems to be like this forgetfulness on the part of the Dante in the poem, and I've missed several days of this, but it's something that Sayers brings up a lot, and that other commentators on Dante bring up, is that sometimes as you're going through this, it can be really useful to distinguish between Dante, the narrator, who's sort of telling us the story from the past, Dante the pilgrim in the poem, who is not a beneficiary of Dante the narrator, and then Dante the poet outside of the poem, who's the person writing both the narrator and Dante the pilgrim. Like the pilgrim here seems like he's just making stupid mistakes, like and Virgil corrects him, but Dante the narrator is in some way above Virgil because this is sort of reflective. Like he's gone through the whole process, and so he can look back at himself in the pilgrim moment and say, yeah, well, that was stupid. But so is Virgil in a sense, because he falls short of the beatific vision. Yeah,
no, that's kind of, see, this is why I ask you, because that's kind of my point, is he's the chinks in the armor are important, and what I understand of human nature, when you have hero worship for somebody, that is a level of reverence within the human mind that usually puts people above reproach. When reproach is then expressed, there is always a significance to that within human nature, be it a significance to the individual or a significance of the action of the people that they are interpreting. It's significant either way. Like there's always some layer to it that this is important. Why am I questioning this? Why did my brain suddenly hit this red flag? So like, why Dante the poet is intending this, my personal opinion is he's trying to point out the flaws in the hero that he has built up to this point. My point for Dante the pilgrim, though, this is a very human interaction. He is going through a situation that is, I mean, for lack of a better term, Lovecraftian. Like this would be so existentially shocking to him on a human level, being transported to this other place where everything seems to function by batshit rules, and like even to the most devout person on the planet, this would be fucking jarring. And I think that's kind of what he's trying to express as the author. Narrator? That's where I'm questioning what he means, because what does this mean to a 14th century Italian who basically wants to kick the papacy in the nuts? Like, I don't understand that frame of reference to truly understand the context that the narrator's trying to give.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, it hadn't occurred to me that Eucharist actually took us one more level of abstraction out. I was thinking of Dante the Pilgrim and Dante the Poet, but in fact, there's also Dante the Speaker, right? With the narrator.
Well, yeah, we've always just did that as author. We've jumbled that part as author as well.
Right, but the speaker and the author are not the same.
No,
yeah.
Yeah, because you have the narrative voice where he's saying, well, this is a thing that happened to me, and obviously, like Dante, the author of the poem, the poet himself, this did not happen, but in the context of the narrator, it did happen to, and the narrator is describing something that happened in his past, and then we get, in that past, here's the fallible Dante who's not yet ascended all the way up Mount Purgatory and into paradise, but the narrator has. The narrator kind of knows what's coming, and we get glimmers of that as we go.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point, because we have been missing that up to this point, because we have been jumbling narrator and author into the same position when we really should have been delineating it. And that probably would have led to a few less tangents in previous episodes.
No, it wouldn't have.
Yeah, we can always find tangents, I'm sure.
I was trying to be hopeful.
Ooh, a piece of candy.
Look,
a piece of candy.
When we're walking around circles, there are infinite tangents that we could potentially go.
No, it's you're not wrong.
We find tangents like 3-year-olds at an Easter egg hunt. Like, that's designed for 3-year-olds.
Well, no, I mean, the thing is we're all nerds. We're all theologically inclined, and we all have I won't say equal level of reading, because I'm looking at the bookshelves behind Eucharist there on this particular subject. I'm more like spread out in my reading, but like there is always value to this, because like the whole point that Dante wrote to anything he wrote, he was not writing just to his contemporaries. He wrote in a way that you could tell he was trying to write to ages coming. the future generations. Like, this was not just for his time. This is exactly what he intended us to do. This was meant to be that kind of lightning rod to spark these kind of conversations to potentially create the better world that he envisioned. And on that note, Despy, would you like to pick up at O Sun, line 90?
O Sun, line
Yeah.
90. Okay, and then how far am I going?
Looks like the finishing point is at 105 at the bottom of the cut.
105. Okay. O sun that healest all distempered visions, thou dost content me so. When thou resolvest that doubting pleases me no less than knowing. Once more a little backward turn thee, said I. There where thou sayest that usury offends, goodness divine and disengage the knot. Philosophy, he said, to him who heeds it, noteth not only in one place alone, after what manner nature takes her course. From intellect divine, and from its art, and if thy physics carefully thou notice, after not many pages shalt thou find that this your art, as far as possible, follows as the disciple doth the master. So that your art is, as it were, God's grandchild.
Really interesting here is he's asking why is usury a sin, which is just a weird question for me personally to be asking.
Yeah, in the 21st century, like, it seems really unexpected and out of place. But in fact, it was one of the primary like focuses of the church at the time, and a focus in the Gospels itself.
Yeah, and on top of that, you're also dealing with, he's a Florentine man. You're talking about the Florentine banking institutions and all kinds of other shit coming into like his interpretation of this as well, Ancom.
Delegated to the Jews.
Yeah, we can get into that layer of fucked up history another day,
Well,
because
that's actually the reason I'm confused why he would not, or he would be asking why usury is a sin, because it was commonly thought of as such in the day, hence why it had been relegated to the Jews, because it was considered sinful for Christians.
But remember, he's from Florence.
To take money as an object.
But remember,
listen, I had a
he's from
libertarian friend
Florence.
of mine one time whenever he installed a piece of software and he got to the terms of service, the terms of the agreement, he asked me to click the button for him because he didn't agree. As if he would not be responsible for them if someone else was the one who clicked the button.
I mean,
I kind of feel like that's what Florentine Christians were doing at the time, right?
Yeah.
They were asking a Jew to like click the button for them.
I mean, to be entirely fair, Jews today do this too. They like, in parts of Israel, specifically those which are very devout about observing Shabbat, they will have Gentiles in, for instance, elevators, whose only job it is to push the button for the floor they're going to.
This happens in parts of New York City as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, and I mean, okay, yeah, it worried me there for an income. I'm like, for a second there, income. I'm like, the way that sentence started, this could be bad, my channel.
No, yeah, I was literally just going over like Jewish religious law about not doing work on the Sabbath.
Yeah, I know. It's just that it's YouTube, and the way that line started, context matters to the transcript.
Fair. Yeah, that's not the most eloquently phrased, but
I remember, what was it? We had a Hasidic Jew, Jewish family, and I remember because I was working at Pizza Hut and I was delivering pizza, and I had delivered to them, but they had asked me like to bring it in the house and put it on the table for them.
Yeah.
And to open the box for them, like if that was okay. And I was like, yeah, totally fine. That's totally fine. Totally against the rules, but I knew exactly why they were asking.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get into the history of why that started, but there is significant history. I highly recommend you look into 1500 BCE Judaism and the Judaic mystic time period. There is reasons for this that we can go into another day that will take, like, we'll be here till nightfall. That being said, Eucharist, you want to close us out with the final lines? Because we're almost done.
Let's do it.
106 to 115.
All right. From these two, if thou bringest to thy mind Genesis at the beginning, it behoves mankind to gain their life and to advance. And since the usurer takes another way, nature herself and in her follower disdains he, for elsewhere he puts his hope. But follow now as I would fain go on, for quivering are the fishes on the horizon, and the wane wholly over Caurus lies, and far beyond there we descend the crag. Yeah, so the lines right before this, so he references Aristotle's physics and then turns to Genesis. And what he says, it's not far from the beginning of the physics. He's talking about the second book of Aristotle's physics, where he lays out what's called the doctrine of causality, or the four causes, the different explanations for something's existence. And that's where he also defines what he means by nature, or what it means for something to be natural. It's the part that nobody reads when they read the ethics, and he talks about what's natural and what's not natural. Nobody goes on to the physics and reads where he sort of defines this in more detail, where he talks about things that happen to things according to their nature or not according to their nature, and then we need to know what their nature is, et cetera, et cetera. But the argument that Virgil is pointing Dante back to is that, like, the argument against usury that Aristotle lays out and that Aquinas picks up on and develops is just that there are things that are made for certain purposes, and you can use them either for the purposes they're designed for or for different purposes. Money is designed as an exchange medium. It's made to buy other useful things. You use it for not for its own sake, but for the sake of other things that you then go on to use. There's something Aristotle says weird or unnatural about trying to make money reproduce with other money, not by using it productively, but by just like sticking it together with more money and expecting it to multiply. That's not how money ought to work. At least that's what Aristotle says. Now, of course, we are all beneficiaries of modern financial systems, and that's exactly how we think about money. We stick it in something with interest, and it just multiplies.
We shouldn't, but we do.
But that's so it's not according to its nature. It's not what it's designed for. And then, as if the point was not driven home enough, Virgil says, think about Genesis. Things reproduce according to their kinds, and they reproduce naturally. They have sex, they have babies. Money can't have sex, right? If you've seen It's a Wonderful Life, at the end when he's loaned out all the money and they've just got the two bills left, and he's like, let's put them in the safe, and maybe they'll reproduce and have like little baby, bills. Of course, that's silly because that's not how that works, but that's exactly how usurers think, is what Aristotle is saying. So
I'm just letting you know right now, Eucharist, Rule 34 of the internet does exist. Money can have sex.
Okay.
I mean, okay, yeah.
But also, this brings up, like, to me, this brings up Marx's conception of CMC versus MCM, and kind of that transition between money being a way to exchange commodities for different commodities, to the shift into commodities being a way to exchange money for more money.
Right. And to find some way to extract more money out of the commodity. Yeah. It's like Marx is following a line of intuition that I think is like Aristotelian and Thomistic in a weird way. There's like I need more conservatives and Christians to actually read Marx, because I think it would do some funny things.
You will have.
I hope to be Marxist.
I know. I hope they do too, because at the very least they will probably they'll be less conservative. I don't care if they're Marxists, because I'm not a fucking Marxist. It's not that. Learn.
Well, or
learn.
I think they would turn a different switch on in their brain about what it could mean to be conservative. This is where I would take it. Where I think, like, if you really understand the tradition that you're claiming to conserve, there's some, like Marx is useful for self-understanding of conservatism the same way like Rousseau is. Like, they're both weird counter critics of the movements in which they find themselves pointing back to some sort of older idea, older way of thinking that I think is really useful. That can be quite. Yeah. Aiko was saying something and I couldn't quite hear him, and I think I talked over him. So.
Rich?
Oh no.
Oh, sorry. I just might be.
Oh, you're cutting out.
But I was just saying. It also.
Oh.
Yeah, you're
Because
breaking up. a lot.
He must be using the lav mic and too far away from the receiver at the moment.
No, it's just my phone's mic, but
No,
Yeah,
now you're
just
coming
saying
through.
People should read Adam Smith.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
Oh,
and this,
yeah,
the,
He does not say what people think he says.
well, yeah, this is kind of my point. Is I wish more conservatives read. Full stop. We don't need to
They
go
read.
into who they read, just because, like, I don't have a problem with people like you who are a conservative, who are well reasoned, who can go through pragmatism and understand that, hey, sometimes what you want isn't the best option, so on, so forth. Like, that is something that comes with education, that a lot of conservatives, once they leave school, they fucking quit. They never learn anything new other than what somebody tells them, and that is useless information. That is how you end up in a cult. I'm not saying all of them are in a cult, but that's the kind of thinking that can get you into that kind of predicament. Like, you gotta do your research. You gotta keep learning. If you stop learning, you start dying.
Yeah, I think there's really something to be said for fostering a kind of intellectual curiosity that, well, I'd say most people don't have, but yeah, I mean, that's certainly a problem. A lot of, especially the
At
people
least
who get paid
American
money to talk on
conservatives.
the internet.
Yeah, at least American
the Charlie
conservatives,
Kirks of the world are not intellectually curious people.
No,
Yeah.
the Charlie Kirks, the Frank Turek's, the so on and so forth. Like, we deal with these people who will do this because it is profitable, and they will say whatever makes their people feel good, whether it's true or not, because it's a show, it's entertainment. And if you do not have your education background somewhat sound, you fall for it because it sounds good. That's what they are using. They are using the common sense fallacy of, oh yeah, that common sense says that that's right. When in reality, it's so much more complicated than that. Yeah, we need to. I have seen you yell at your fellow conservatives like, stop, stop, like, because you're like me. Stop being on my side if you're this stupid. Like,
Yeah.
you're making my job harder.
I certainly feel that way sometimes. Yes.
Because that's the problem. Education. I don't have a problem with conservatives like my dad, even though he and I fought like cats and dogs, because he was a fiscal conservative. He was literally about trying to make sure that the government was well balanced and we weren't fucking ourselves. Okay, that's a conservatism I can understand. What the people like him morphed it into over the last 40 years, not so much.
Mm.
You know, so on, so forth. And taking it back into the politics of the 14th century, much like the Ghibellines and the Guelphs, this is much the same kind of issue. We were dealing with people who were fighting against the progressive changes and negative progressive changes in this particular aspect that were being done, that were allowing usury on a scale not seen in Europe up to this point, and by people that were viewed as being unethical for even attempting to do such, so on, so forth. Like, this is a dramatic political shift that he is bringing attention to, and by the way, something he also fought in a actual war over. Like, people forget that, you know, Dante was a cavalryman. He actually drew blood for these ideas.
I want to read more things by people who actually fought in wars. That's a common theme of people I like to read the most. They're kind of
Well,
cool.
if they're talking about the war, that's kind of a useful perspective to have. Yeah, like, I'm sorry, like, I can sit there and I can go back and talk about the Punic Wars or blah blah blah. You pick your fucking war from history. I am gonna probably have a well-reasoned and good cohesive, you know, argument to bring about like certain things about it. But the people who actually fought in it, they are going to bring a perspective nobody else can. It's just that simple. Now, we'll have to read through their victors spoils bullshit because they're the ones that won and are living to write about it. But, like, I mean, it's a perspective that you can get in no other way. So yeah, and Dante internalized it in a way that most others do not, especially in his era. Because he turned it not only into political commentary, but social commentary, personal commentary. He wanted you to think on every level that you normally just kept that door closed to. And he sits there and kicks the door jamb into every single one of them. I think that is a direct response to the trauma that he suffered during the Battle of Campaldino, where at one point in time he was hip deep in the bodies of his comrades. Like, that is an enemy attestation of what they saw him do. I don't know about you, that fucked me up pretty bad. I can't think of anybody who would go through that situation and not get fucked up by it unless they were fucked up by something else first. Like, anybody else? Like, I can't think of, like, that shit's horrifying even to imagine. So I think that's what he's doing. This is, as Rich and I have pointed out, this is a Catholic humanism, but it is humanism that he is expressing 2 centuries before it became the norm. Like, this was for, like, the saintly people up to this point. I'm gonna have to start playing crickets on you people. Jesus.
No, I'm listening. This is
I know, but no dead air. It's like when I'm like, I let it set, and then there's nobody chimes in. It's like shit. So gotta make a joke because otherwise it's then just complete dead air. Now that being said, like, that's something that we have to take into account because, like, as we read through this is a man that is trying to make his fellow humans around him see the horrors that he saw, at least in part, so that they could potentially become better too. Because at least in my interpretation of his writings throughout his life, Dante did view his trauma as a source for what led him to being the better man that he was in later life. And I think he's trying to express that because most people don't ever see those kind of horrors, even in the 13th century. It was a higher percent of the population who saw that shit back then, but it still was pretty rare. Ugh. And on that note, I see that we're at that time we're going to be losing Rich here in a minute. Now, any closing thoughts that anybody wants to bring up about Canto 11 specifically?
I think it's really funny that basically it starts out by saying, look, guys, this is going to be kind of boring compared to what came before. Like, we're just going to talk about some stuff for a minute. Not a lot of description of what's going on. We'll get the details later, but, like, it's just like, okay, we're going to rest here a while. Yeah, while our nose adjusts, like Rich said. And, like, why don't you give me a lecture? Okay, it's going to be boring. But, I just think it's a funny setup, just like an interesting dramatic break. I love it. So, really good framing.
Yeah,
and of course, in the Sayers edition, gives us the wonderful map of the rest of hell. It's quite good.
For me, it was not this is going to be boring, but it was that kind of universal thing that any, like, aristocrat would have known. They got to sit down with their tutor, and it's time to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it's not boring, like, it's that, okay, gather round, kids, it's time for a lesson. Like, I mean, that's because, like, in this time period, that is pretty much how everybody is taught, is by direct tutor.
I was always wondering, this is one thing I was going to bring up, but I forgot to bring it up, but was, when exactly was the Knights Templar dissolved?
1311.
So my question is like, when we're talking about usury, is that in the back of his mind when he's
He
when he's
dies. Maybe, I don't know. I'd have to dig into that because that's not one I've read about specifically. The time periods are close. I just don't know if the information would have like been as widespread at that time period due to the proliferation of knowledge being slower. Like, because we're talking about within a couple of decades of each other, and the church tried to keep a lot of the shit they did with the Templars secret.
No, well, I understand that, but at the same time, we're also talking about Dante, who has access to all of the information. The chance of him possibly hearing about it might.
No, yeah, I just hadn't thought about it, so I don't want to say definitively because I haven't dug into it, but it's one of those things where he could have known, or he could have at least heard a legend of, legendized version of, and, been interpreting, but I just don't know of any reference specifically to it, at least in any of the commentaries I read. So I'll have to dig further into that, because, that could be, because that is the crime that they were charged with.
Yep. I just remember, what was it, as like thinking in the back of my mind is like for this time period, it's like, wasn't the Knights Templar dissolved at this point? Was what my
I just have to dig further because I don't want to say one way or another on it, because I just don't know. But yeah, it very much could be because of the overlapping time period, or at least a legendized version of it. If not the actual church version of it. He may have heard stories in the pub type shit.
Yeah.
Because I mean, as we pointed out by I think it was in Canto 6, near the end of his life, motherfucker was ordering a lot of wine. He drank a lot. I have a sneaky suspicion he didn't just do it at home.
Yeah.
You weren't here for that one, Eucharist, but near the end of his life, he was ordering 6 barrels of wine a month for his household.
Nice.
His household was 4 people.
My hero. Let's go. It's like the bar tabs from the American founders parties.
Yeah, because we could find shit like that. It's just like, Jesus Christ. Well, we could also see that he ate a lot of salt pork.
Hmm.
And I'm guessing bread, because that's not something you order. You either make it yourself or you buy it pre-made by a baker in town. But salt pork and bread, that was a pretty staple diet in the 1300s and 1400s.
Oh, crap.
Oh man, now I'm hungry.
I was actually supposed to make bagels earlier. Damn it.
Oh, loser! You didn't make bagel.
Yeah,
well,
I gotta make the dough and let it sit. So.
Well, I won't have to start quite at the end of this because of how early we started today. But in a couple hours, I get to start fucking with the smoker because I got a Boston butt and 5 pounds of chicken to smoke.
Very nice.
Because my wife is doing a potluck on Monday, so I want to get it all done because we're going to see her father tomorrow. So I'm gonna get it all done so it's ready to go for Monday morning.
Now that I've gotten my intellectual exercise out for the day, I'm gonna spend the rest of the day watching college football. So that's.
Okay. Which team?
My wife's family has turned me into a Tennessee Vols fan, so it's been pure suffering. But this year should be good. We'll see.
At least you're not a Buckeye, and I don't have to disown you.
Absolutely not.
I
went to Wisconsin. I could not
today.
root for them. I would catch on fire if I rooted for the Buckeyes. My degree would ignite. I wouldn't.
My wife just threw a tennis ball to get my attention. It actually hit me, so she's freaking out now. And I'm just like,
very nice.
Yeah, no, because Wolverines go blue. I constantly give a certain people shit because they're from Ohio, or actually went to fucking Ohio State, and then I really have to give them shit.
This is relevant to the conversation. If you want a feeling of what it must be like to actually climb Mount Purgatory, to experience a long, suffering, purgatorial fire, drive on the Ohio Turnpike. when you have the same rest stop and gas station copy pasted every 45, 50 miles. It feels like you're going nowhere for 6 hours. It's pure suffering.
You're not
Maybe
wrong.
it's hell, maybe it's purgatory. I don't know, but
No, you're
Have you
not
driven
wrong.
through western Kansas?
okay, fair. No, anywhere out west is bad too. But the Turnpike, particularly, like, Southern Ohio is beautiful. It's Appalachian. It's gorgeous. The Turnpike
Yeah.
is like is hell, or maybe purgatory. I don't know.
No,
Depends on how
like
loud you-
he's not wrong, because it is the best way to put it is, you know, those people who play City Skylines and they build one section of a
Yes.
city and then literally just copy drop.
dude.
Yeah, that's
the same
literal.
thing!
Yeah, it's fuck.
I know what you're talking about, though. Yes, Desperado. That's correct.
Yeah.
But
I'm just saying,
in Kansas, there's no rest stops. It's just nothing.
agree. Like
You might
can at
find a
least
gas
agree.
station.
Like quite literally from Salina to Hayes, Kansas, you can count the number of trees on one hand, even if you had an accident with a saw.
Yeah, no.
Well, we lost Rich.
Well, we knew we were going to. He stayed
Yeah.
a little bit longer than I think he just forgot to unmute. Oh, no, he switched over to his phone so he can still listen.
Oh, there we go.
Now,
Now that he switched over to his phone, we can go now.
Now, that being said, like, when we are actually like, oh, go ahead.
Capital didn't accept capitalism. They called until Vatican. Church held on prohibition.
You're cutting out.
Yeah, he's cutting out, but I got most of it. He's talking about the fact that at this point it wasn't really called capitalism, and they called it something else. He cut out before I got that part, though. Usually, if I catch the first syllable, I can finish the rest of what he meant.
Mercantile capitalism.
Vatican.
The Vatican did mercantile capitalism? Okay, that makes sense.
Or mercantilism, as it's more commonly referred to now. Well,
You're cutting in and out real bad. I don't.
yeah, which is really weird, because normally when you're on your phone, the speaker sucks, but you don't normally have signal issues. Now that being said, like, as we're digging through this, like, beyond the tangent onto college football, like, this is one of these things that I think is important to like really bring into it, because as Dante is going through this, he is kind of team sports because of the way that he has literally fought in two separate conflicts, trying to move the world to a better way than what he had seen it becoming. So much so that at one point in time he was almost excommunicated, and the only reason that he wasn't is the Pope got sick and didn't sign the work before Dante died. Like, I don't know, like, this is an important thing. Huh?
Cold cited somebody's excommunication on their deathbed.
Actually, it was the Pope who ended up ill for many months. Dante died rather suddenly, so like it was one of those things.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
Fair.
Trying to give me an aneurysm. Ugh. Trying to give me an aneurysm.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
gentlemen, it's been fun.
Well,
Hopefully, can make it more regularly now.
Well, yeah, I
college
mean,
is
having to
really open,
move
so-
and all that shit, like, we understood, man.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those things where it was like, well, shit.
Yeah,
But,
it was not good timing for the past forever. But
I mean,
I
it
just
happens.
want to stick it out until we get into Purgatory, because Purgatory is my favorite. I absolutely love it. I should like Paradiso best, but Purgatory is where it's at. It's real fun. So hopefully I can stick around that long.
I mean, we're going to be doing this for like the next year and a half at least, so, you know. So yeah, it's one of those things. One of these days we definitely will be taking like a whole episode to like go over all the artwork about this and like actually like bring up topographies and actually like show the progression. Like I'll make the visual aids where we actually can like see the pathway and all that shit. Because this is a story that has moved so many cultures. It will take at least 3 hours to cover half of the art that we want to cover, let alone half of the art that there is.
Yeah.
So like we definitely want you back for that one because you were gonna have all kinds of fun ones to bring in that even we aren't gonna think about. So I'm glad that you're moved and situated, and honestly, the place, with the exception of the table with a shit ton of books off to your left side. Like,
Right.
like it doesn't look much different behind you other than they look about 3, maybe 4 feet further back than they used to be.
Yeah, they're a little bit further, and I was able to bring my small shelf in and angle it for a corner shelf, and get them all sort of in one row. The way things were before, I had my monitors like over here, and so where my keyboard is now, it was the big table thing that always had stacks of books. I'm trying to avoid that now. I have a little side table over here, a little table over here, but yeah.
Actually, the trick I learned for that is when it's books that you need readily at hand, instead of doing the stacks or setting on a table, drawers, because you'll restrict yourself to how many you have near you, and then it ends up being this drawer has everything I need for this subject. Very quick. Let's just for you, let's bludgeon Rob Noor real quick because I'll just use a prime example. Because Rob's smart, but every once in a while he says some dumb shit, and I watch your face go bright red, like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I need a book. Yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, when I get back to campus on Monday, I'll send you guys pictures of my office there, which has about half of my books now. Because you can't see it, but we have drop ceilings in here, and so I had extenders on all these shelves, so I lost 4 shelves worth of books, and so I took all of those to campus and more. So I've got so many in my.
Oh, it'll be nice. Yeah. And honestly, one of these weeks you should join us from campus just because it would be freaking great to see the office as the backdrop for one of these days.
Yeah, I can actually do that.
Get an air of authority in there.
Yeah.
We'll all come in in suits that day.
There. Like, I want to get like a microphone and a better camera on campus so I can because I do Zoom calls and stuff, and I'm like, every time I do a Zoom call from campus, I'm like, ugh, I wish I was at home with my setup, that it looks so much better. So I just need more equipment to take campus with me.
Well, yeah, it's just, for me, like, if I still worked in a kitchen, I'd definitely like bring it into the kitchen. The reason I don't set up in my home kitchen is because I would literally have to be like setting up mounts on like cabinet doors and shit, because like I have it's not a galley kitchen because it's too big for that, but it is a kind of like pathway kitchen where it horseshoes around in the back wall. So to get cameras in there, I either have to start like screwing mounts into the bottom of my cabinets or onto my counters, and no, you guys aren't worth that, sorry. Like, I got butcher block counter and stuff like that. I'm not putting screws into that. When I mounted it, I didn't even put screws into it. It is literally mounted with glue and wooden dowels. Well, because like it's just one of those things, like, I'm picky about certain things in my kitchen. Not everything, because I can get by with a fucking campfire, but if I have a kitchen, like, I'm not going to have, like, exposed metal on my counter unless it's a stainless steel countertop. Like, it's just that simple. Too easy to catch your knife or the edge of your finger on something at that. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that my sink is too big to fit accurately to undermount it, I would have undermounted it. But it's too deep, it would have went below where my drain goes.
Gotcha.
But on that note, just because like bringing it to like while you're doing other stuff and like in the other places you're comfortable, it seems to inspire you to think of other ideas that you don't necessarily think of sitting at your chair at home. Because people will argue it's the kinesthesia of it, but for me, it's just like you're in a different place. You're thinking in a different, modality because you're doing something different. It just by proxy, your brain is what the chemicals do. You end up getting a different pathway in that moment.
I so often sit down to try to work down here and then end up playing Baldur's Gate 3 or something. So
I see that pop up. There was a couple of times where I saw it pop up on a Friday night, and I knew you weren't coming the next Saturday, and I'm like, that motherfucker's staying up all night playing Baldur's Gate. He could have made it.
Okay. No, I had
I know. I know. I'm just giving you shit. I'm just giving you shit because I'm the same way. Last night I actually tried to sleep halfway decent. It didn't work, but half the time I sleep 2 hours and then I show up here, and that's because I was stuck watching something or working on this chapter of the book or doing this or doing that. It's just my brain doesn't shut off. It's really hard for my brain to shut off. So yeah, you put me in a place where I have a way to turn my brain off, aka video games. I actually have to uninstall certain games so that I don't lose time to it. Ark, there was one point in time where I played almost 480 hours of Ark in a month.
Wow.
It was pretty much any time I was not asleep.
Yeah.
In that time period, though, I became like a solo alpha tribe, where I was one dude taking on 30 people with my base, but not healthy.
Yeah.
So there's certain games that get uninstalled because of that trait. So I can understand 100%. Hey, I got Baldur's Gate here, and my computer runs it real nice, and hey, I can go kill that freaking thing of goblins, or hey, I can go decide to be the evil prick and kick the freaking the druids out, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, this is just my second.
You should be able to hear me now.
Awesome.
Oh yes,
The only
there you
thing I
are.
was trying to say was that back when you were talking about it, that the church didn't accept interest rates until Vatican II.
Mhm.
So that way of looking at economics persisted, and even after Vatican II, the church is still critical of capitalism. So it took a long time for it to even accept interest rates.
Well, openly accept interest rates, because we still have the Vatican Bank to talk about another night.
Anyway, now I'm gonna go. Just made it to work. I'll see you later.
Have a great day.
Nice chatting.
And on that note, we will draw this one to a conclusion, because for some reason it was acting up. The audio did come through fine.